Chapter 2258. The facts proved that Qinshin's deduction was correct. The sacred formation that enveloped the secret chamber was the ultimate crimson golden star formation. However, Ji Tianqing had added some changes to it. However, this did not affect the main structure of the formation. Under Qinshin's guidance, Yunyao stepped on the stars and clenched her fingers together. She continuously cast spells, producing dazzling radiance. She did not stop for a full 6 hours. In total, she formed more than 10,000 seals. It was impossible for an ordinary martial saint to memorize such a complicated method to break the formation in one go, much less execute it smoothly. However, Qinshin did it. She memorized the steps in sequence to break the formation without making any mistakes. Yunyao did it too. She followed Qinshin's guidance and formed the seals without missing a step. Both mother and son were peerless geniuses that only appeared once in 1,000 years. Finally, 6 hours passed. Yunyao finished casting and successfully broke the ultimate crimson golden star formation. At that moment, the golden light barrier that enveloped the secret chamber released a dazzling light. Then the golden light quickly retracted into the wall. The entire formation also closed. Yunyao watched the formation close with her own eyes. She revealed a gratified expression and said proudly in her heart, "Qinshin, how can you be so monstrous? Even if there are countless geniuses in the world, compared to you they are like fireflies to the moon. They can't be compared." Yaya was also very excited. She said excitedly, "Brother is simply too powerful. I'm afraid that other than father and mother, no one can compare to brother's talent." Qinshin received such praise, but she was neither arrogant nor impatient. She said calmly, "Mother, you've been casting spells continuously for a few hours. Your magic power must be depleted. You should recover your magic power first. Then we'll go look for father." Yunyao thought for a moment and shook her head. "No, your father has already left for a day and a half. I have to hurry over at my fastest speed to find him. I still need 2 days on the way. It's enough for me to recover my magic power." Then she waved her hands and sent out 2 rays of blue light into the secret chamber's stone door. With a muffled creak sound, the stone door slowly opened. Yunyao hurriedly stepped out of the secret chamber. However, as soon as she reached the door of the secret room, she was stopped by a white-haired old man who wore an apricot yellow Taoist robe and held a horsetail whisk. This person was the Huanglong Taoist who was guarding outside the door. For the past 1.5 days, he had been standing guard outside the door, not taking a single step out. In the past few hours, not only did he feel the energy fluctuations in the secret room, but he also saw the array light up with golden light. He knew that Yunyao had never given up on cracking the array. However, he knew that it was impossible for Yunyao to break the formation set up by Ji Tianqing. At this moment he was dumbfounded when he saw Yunyao open the door of the secret chamber and appear at the door. "Mistress, you actually broke Master's array? How is this possible?" Huanglong Taoist couldn't believe his eyes. He stared at Yunyao dumbfounded. Yunyao frowned and looked at him asking, "Huanglong, why are you here? Have you been guarding outside the secret chamber all this time?" Huanglong Taoist came back to his senses and didn't dare to hide anything. He hurriedly explained, "Mistress, that's right. This disciple was ordered by Master to guard here." Yunyao nodded to show that she understood. She said in a dignified tone, "Huanglong, get out of the way. I'm going to find Tianqing. I can't let him take the risk alone." Huanglong Taoist refused to back down. He persuaded her earnestly, "Mistress, with your talent and wisdom, of course you can understand that Master did this with good intentions. He would rather take the risk himself and die than be a burden to you and your child. Now that you've cracked the array, if you really go to Baiming Mountain, wouldn't his painstaking efforts be in vain?" Before Master left, he left a decree for this disciple. "Please forgive me, mistress. This disciple will never allow you to leave." Yunyao saw that his attitude was firm, and that he would not back down. She said in a low voice, "Huanglong, if you can understand Tianqing's feelings, you can also understand my worries. Don't worry, I won't do anything I'm not confident in. And I definitely won't watch as Tianqing fights alone. I'll send a message to God Lord Luoshui right now and ask her to help me save Tianqing." Huanglong Taoist was taken aback by these words. Soon after, He revealed a look of pleasant surprise and nodded repeatedly. Right? That's right. Mistress, you're the most considerate. Only God Lord Luoshui can break into Baiming Palace and save Master and Miss Aku. You're the eldest senior sister of Luoshui Mountain, the future overlord of Luoshui Divine Kingdom. Only you can ask martial god Luoshui for help. In truth, Huanglong Taoist had long since thought that only a martial god expert could guarantee the safety of Ji Tianxing and Aku. However, his words carried little weight, and he had no friendship with martial god Luoshui, much less contact him. He could only dispel this thought. Since Yunyao had spoken, he naturally agreed wholeheartedly. Yunyao didn't waste any time. She hurriedly took out a transmission jade slip and sent a message to martial god Luoshui. Then she said to Huanglong Taoist, I've already sent a message to ask God Lord Luoshui for help. You can rest assured now, right? Huanglong Taoist nodded and bowed gratefully. Many thanks, mistress. If God Lord Luoshui appears and successfully saves Master and Miss Aku, Pillar of Heaven's Mountain will forever remember this kindness. With that, he no longer stopped Yunyao and took the initiative to retreat to the side. Yunyao gave him a few words of advice before quickly leaving Pillar of Heaven's palace. Arriving at the training ground, she summoned the glass fire dragon and rushed to the north as fast as lightning. Huanglong Taoist stood in place and watched the glass fire dragon disappear into the horizon. He prayed in his heart, I hope Master, Mistress, and Miss Aku can return safely. Dark North Mountain, near the Holy City. It was late at night. The sky was as dark as ink, and cold winds howled in the night sky. The newly constructed Holy City was as majestic and dignified as ever. However, there were only around 1 million demons in the Holy City. It was no longer as prosperous as before. In the past, the city would have been filled with lights, but now it was dark and desolate. Whoosh! An invisible black silhouette tore through the night sky and flew above the Holy City, stopping in the midst of a demonic cloud. This black silhouette was none other than the invisible Ji Tianxing. After 2 days of traveling at full speed, he had finally arrived at the demon race's holy city from Pillar of Heaven's Mountain. 1,000 li to the north across a brown wasteland, he would reach the Divine Mountain. The summit of the Divine Mountain was his goal. Dark North Palace. However, he had long since made preparations and plans. He would not rashly charge into Dark North Palace. He hid in the night sky and observed the holy city from above, quietly waiting for an hour. Only when a group of black-armored demon guards emerged from the city lord's mansion did he begin to move. Whoosh! Chapter 2259. Jiku had once mentioned something to Ji Tianxing. After Baiming Palace was rebuilt, it was still lacking many things. There were cultivation resources, as well as various miscellaneous items. In the next few months, the things that were lacking would have to be gradually replenished. Thus, every 2 or 3 days, Baiming Palace would send a group of guards to the holy city. The city lord's mansion would prepare the things that Baiming Palace lacked in advance, and the guards would bring them back. As the steward of internal affairs, Jiku was well aware of this matter. In the past, Ji Tianxing had not taken this matter to heart. Only after Jiku's incident and when he was considering a plan of action did he remember this matter. The group of demon race guards were all members of Baiming Palace. They possessed identity tokens and could enter Baiming Palace at will. Thus, they became Ji Tianxing's targets. This group of guards had a total of 18 people. They all wore cold black metal armor and heavy helmets, revealing only their purple or dark red eyes. After they left the city lord's mansion, they silently flew into the night sky and leisurely rushed back to Baiming Palace. Ji Tianxing silently followed behind them, maintaining a distance of 100 meters so that he was not discovered. After 100 breaths of time, the demon race guards were flying above a mountain range. The night was pitch black, and the dense devil chi and black clouds obscured them from view. At this moment, Ji Tianxing finally made his move. Using the Armillary Heaven's secret art, he controlled the power of the world and transformed it into a giant invisible hand that instantly captured a guard. This guard walked at the very back of the group, looking completely unconcerned. It was obvious that he had carried out this mission many times and had always been safe, so he was not vigilant. But he did not expect that death would descend upon him without any warning. The The giant invisible hand firmly restrained him, making him unable to move or even make a sound. Then, an invisible spike formed from spiritual energy viciously pierced his spiritual energy. He was killed on the spot without making a single sound. Even at the moment of his death, he did not know what had happened, nor did he know who the murderer was. After Ji Tianqing killed the black armored guard, his divine soul left his body and entered this person's body. As for his real body, he had placed it in the sword world safe and sound. Next, Ji Tianqing would be in charge of controlling the body of the demon clan guard. On the surface, this person did not seem to have changed at all, but in reality his soul had already been replaced by Ji Tianqing. From the moment Ji Tianqing made his move to the moment he completed the possession, it was only a matter of a blink of an eye. The dozen or so guards at the front of the group did not notice anything amiss. They maintained a steady speed and flew towards Baiming Palace. Ji Tianqing adapted to his new body and sped up to catch up. Nothing was said along the way. Half an hour later, the 18 guards returned to Baiming Palace. They first went to the Internal Affairs Hall and took out various resources and miscellaneous items from their spatial rings and handed them to the Internal Affairs Manager. After completing the mission, everyone left the Internal Affairs Palace and returned to their respective residences. Ji Tianqing was thinking about where to find Ji Ke's whereabouts. At this time, a black armored guard came up and patted his shoulder familiarly. He smiled lightly and said, "A man, come to my place for a drink. Tonight at the City Lord's mansion, Captain, you gave me a bottle of good wine. Drinking it can strengthen my qi and blood and increase my cultivation for several years." Only now did Ji Tianqing know that this body was called a man. Okay. He nodded without hesitation and replied. He spoke in the demon language. In order not to expose his identity, his words were very short. The black armored guard did not suspect anything. He brought him into Baiming Palace and to a room in the backyard. This room only had 2 rooms, the bedroom inside and the living room outside. The area was not big. There was also a secret room underground used for meditation and cultivation. The black armored guard pulled Ji Tianqing to a seat in the living room. He took out a bottle of wine and a few dishes from his spatial ring and began to eat and drink with Ji Tianqing. The wine was the demon race's common strong blood wine. The dishes were made from demon beast meat. It was rough and fishy, making it hard to swallow. But Ji Tianqing did not want to reveal anything. He could only drink and eat as if nothing had happened. He rarely took the initiative to speak. The black armored guard saw that he was silent and comforted him straightforwardly. Man, why aren't you saying anything? Are you still angry about that matter? Get over it. Although we are the guards of Baiming Palace, we are still lowly servants. The manager can scold or hit us as he wishes. As long as you listen to brother, you will have a share of my benefits in the future. Ji Tianqing then knew that this person was called Pu Cheng. He had been in Baiming Palace for several years. As for the matter between man and Pu Cheng, he had no interest in knowing. He was a man of few words but kept urging Pu Cheng to drink. In 15 minutes, Pu Cheng had drunk more than half of the flask of strong blood wine. He was so drunk he could not think clearly, but he was like many people. The more drunk he was, the more he spoke. He did not even think before he spoke. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Ji Tianqing kept probing Pu Cheng, trying to find out more information. I heard that our internal affairs deacon is a human female impersonating? Isn't that so? Pu Cheng hugged the flask of wine and said with drunken eyes, she hid it really well. But she still could not escape the great Mo Saint's eyes. Ji Tianqing continued to ask, in a few days she will be executed. Who will be in charge of watching over her? Pu Cheng hugged the flask of wine and drank a few mouthfuls of the dark red blood wine. He said unclearly, in any case there are those bastards from the torture department. It has nothing to do with us. Let me tell you, man, this is a fight between immortals. We are just small fries, we should not interfere. Torture department. Ji Tianqing furrowed his brows and had a plan in mind. Pu Cheng lay drunk on the table and said with a smile with his eyes closed, "What is it? Are you thinking of being whipped by the executioner last month? Be careful in the future. That torture department is hell. If you go in, even if you don't die, you will lose half your life." Ji Tianqing no longer paid any attention to him. He stretched out his hand and shot out a formless soul power that struck his divine soul. Pu Cheng immediately fell into a deep sleep and quieted down. Ji Tianqing quietly left and flew out of Baiming Palace. He looked around for the location of the torture department. The torture department was at the cliff behind Baiming Palace. It was shaped like a skull and was very eerie and eye-catching. After Ji Tianqing found the torture department, he hid in the shadows and observed for a long time. However, there were large numbers of guards inside and outside the torture department. There were also many saint-level formations. The defense was very tight. He even faintly felt that there were a few faint powerful consciousness shrouding the torture department. He immediately guessed that Jiku was imprisoned in the torture department. The martial saints of the Mo race were watching the movements of the torture department to prevent him from breaking out of the prison. If he rashly appeared or acted, he would definitely be surrounded and attacked. The present torture department looked calm on the surface, but in reality, it had already set up an inescapable net. Chapter 2260. The night was as dark as ink. Baiming Palace was shrouded in demonic energy and black clouds. The atmosphere was heavy and oppressive. Ji Tianqing quietly returned to Park Cheng's residence. He sat at the table with an indifferent expression, staring deeply at the table. He was thinking about how to rescue Jiku. There had never been a moment when he was as anxious and worried as he was now. He knew that Jiku was imprisoned in the torture department and was less than 10,000 zhang away from him, but he could not immediately rescue her. Who could understand this kind of torment? He did not know what kind of suffering and torture Jiku was enduring. There was only one thing he was sure of. With the protection of the heavenly star chain, Jiku's soul would not be destroyed. However, she could only preserve her life. That was all. Ji Tianqing's mind spun quickly, and one idea after another appeared. However, he thought of more than a dozen plans, but none of them could withstand scrutiny. He could only give them all up. Unknowingly, for hours passed. It was daybreak. Park Cheng was lying motionlessly on the table, sleeping soundly. At this moment the door was kicked open. A middle-aged devilish being in a suit of black armor strode into the room with an enraged expression. This person was also a guard of Baiming Palace, but he was the captain of the guards. He glanced at the sleeping Park Cheng, and then his cold gaze landed on Ji Tianqing. He angrily shouted, "You two short-lived animals, have you forgotten today's mission? The entire team is waiting for you. What are you two doing hiding in the room?" Ji Tianqing glanced at him indifferently, but did not speak. The captain saw the wine jug on the table and suddenly realized. He grinned. Good. The two little bastards were actually hiding in the room to drink wine, and they were even drunk to the point of being dead drunk? Humph. So lawless. Aren't you afraid that this seat will send you to the torture department and skin you alive? Hearing this, Ji Tianqing's eyes flashed. He immediately had an idea. He slowly stood up and stared coldly at the captain, a cold smile on his lips. Idiot, I've tolerated you for a long time. The guard captain was stunned on the spot. He stared at him and asked in disbelief, "What did you say?" The new man in front of him had always been dull and cowardly. He simply couldn't believe that a man dared to scold him to his face. "Little bastard, I see that you've gone against the heavens." The guard captain flew into a rage, and his eyes turned scarlet. Without hesitation he raised his fists and smashed them toward Ji Tianqing's head. In a fit of rage, he punched without holding back. He wished he could kill Ji Tianqing on the spot. Ji Tianqing naturally wouldn't avoid it. He smiled contemptuously and raised his hand to slap him. Pa! Before the guard captain could even touch Ji Tianqing, he was slapped in the face and a crisp sound rang out. His vision went dark, and he was sent flying backward with his head spinning. Thud! The door was smashed into pieces, and he fell into the courtyard. When he got up from the ground, his head was covered in blood, and half of his face was a bloody mess. Suffering such a heavy injury, the guard captain was dizzy. He was so angry that he almost passed out. He staggered up, pointed at Ji Tianqing in the room, and cursed hysterically, "You little bastard! You dare to go against your superior, you're finished. Just you wait, I can't do anything to you, but someone will kill you." With that, the guard captain staggered and left, running as fast as the wind to the Department of Torture. Ji Tianqing didn't chase after him. Watching the guard captain's figure disappear into the distance, a playful sneer appeared at the corner of his mouth. Complain to the Department of Torture? That's exactly what I want. This thought flashed through his mind. He turned back to the table and sat down, waiting silently. At this time, Pu Cheng, who had been sleeping soundly, woke up in a daze. He stretched, yawned, and looked sleepily at Ji Tianqing. He couldn't help but complain, "Man, what's wrong with you? You didn't even drink 2 mouthfuls last night, and you poured it all into my stomach? Oh no." Halfway through his words, his expression suddenly changed. He jumped up like a cat whose tail had been stepped on, and ran out in a hurry. "We're finished. It's already morning, but we haven't left. The captain will definitely punish us." He had just run to the door when he saw that the door had been shattered and scattered on the ground. He was dumbfounded. He turned his head to look at Ji Tianqing. Seeing him still sitting there, Pu Cheng was dumbfounded. "A man, what are you standing there for? What's with this door? Don't tell me I'm drunk again?" Ji Tianqing waved his hand at him, and said with a light smile, "It's not your fault, you should leave, I won't go." Pu Cheng stared at him with wide eyes, even more confused. "You don't want to live anymore? Listen to me, come with me, let's go find the captain to apologize, and give him some benefits." Before he could finish, a vicious curse came from outside the courtyard. "You want to apologize now? It's too late. Even if you kneel down and call me father, it's useless." Pu Cheng turned his head to look at the courtyard, and saw the captain of the guards, whose face was covered in blood, leading 2 executioners in blood-red armor, rushing over with a murderous aura. His expression changed on the spot, and he couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. "Damn it! Isn't it just being drunk and delaying the time? Do you have to report to the torture department?" The captain of the guards rushed over with a sinister smile, and kicked him to the ground. He rushed into the room like a fierce tiger, pointed at Ji Tianqing and shouted, "Sir Executioner, it's this bastard. He has no respect for the law, caused trouble when drunk, offended his superiors, and beat me up so badly." The 2 executioners, who were covered in the smell of blood, stepped into the room expressionlessly, and took out shackles without another word, wanting to tie up Ji Tianqing. Pu Cheng scrambled into the room, and quickly stopped the 2 executioners, anxiously bowing and apologizing. "Sir, please wait. What did our man do wrong for you to want to arrest him? Also, Sir Captain, we did delay the time, this is our fault. But you don't need to invite the torture department, sir." The captain of the guards glared fiercely at him, and shouted angrily. Pu Cheng scrambled to the side. "I'll settle this with you later." This what is going on?" Pu Cheng was stunned and refused to move, feeling helpless and wronged. Ji Tianqing slowly stood up, patted his shoulder, and transmitted his voice. "It's not your fault if you don't want to die. Then move, don't speak nonsense." Pu Cheng turned his head to look at him, his eyes filled with confusion and surprise. He didn't dare to believe it. A man who had always been very weak suddenly seemed like a different person. While he was in a daze, the 2 executioners tied up Ji Tianqing and dragged him out of the room. Ji Tianqing did not resist, and walked expressionlessly towards the torture department. Pu Cheng looked at his back as he left. His mind was in a mess, and he felt that something was wrong. Chapter 2261. The guard captain stood outside the palace walls and watched as Ji Tianqing was escorted into the torture department. He raised his hand to wipe off the bloodstains on his face, revealing a smug grin. "Little bastard. You want to fight me? I'll kill you." After viciously cursing, he turned around and left in satisfaction. Soon 2 executioners escorted Ji Tianqing into the dark, bloody, and putrid torture department. There was a semicircular hall at the entrance. There were 6 passageways connected to it. There were several guards guarding the entrance of each passageway. The executioners escorted Ji Tianqing into the second passageway on the left. They headed to the deepest prison cell. The prison cell was not big. It was only 30 feet square. 2 dark red gemstone lamps were lit in the corner. All kinds of ferocious torture instruments were hung on the walls. 2 executioners tied Ji Tianqing to a dark red pillar. They used a few rusty and blood-stained chains to tie him up. Then one of them took out a dark purple soul-punishing whip and said expressionlessly, "You violated the rules of Biming Palace. You drank too much and offended your superiors. According to the law, you should be punished with 50 lashes and imprisoned for a month to reflect on your mistakes." The executioner waved the long soul-punishing whip and whipped it at Ji Tianxing. Crack! Crack! A series of crisp cracking sounds could be heard. A dazzling purple light flashed. The vicious soul-punishing whip struck Ji Tianxing's body again and again, tearing his skin and flesh apart and causing blood to spurt out. However, he kept his head down and did not make a sound. After all, this body did not belong to him. He had already used a little trick to sever the connection between his divine soul and his body. Even if this body was cut into pieces, he would not feel any pain. However, the executioner was a little perverted. Seeing that he did not scream or twitch, he became angrier and waved the soul-punishing whip with all his might. "Humph, you're quite stubborn. Since you don't know how to repent, I'll add another 10 lashes. Just like that, the original 50 lashes became 60 lashes. 100 breaths later, the execution was finally over. The executioner put away the soul-punishing whip and left the cell expressionlessly. As for Ji Tianxing's body, his clothes were ragged and his flesh was badly mangled. He had been beaten to a horrible state, but he didn't care. His hair was disheveled and he lowered his head, not saying a word. At first glance, it looked like he had fainted from the beating. But in fact, he was secretly probing the situation in the torture department with his soul. He had to find Jika's location as soon as possible and determine which cell she was imprisoned in. Only then could he proceed with the next step of his plan. In Biming Palace, in a hidden and spacious secret room, more than a dozen gemstone lamps were lit on the walls, illuminating the secret room in a dark red color. There was a stone table in the middle of the secret room. On it were several plates of spirit fruits and pastries, as well as a pot of spirit tea. For experts with different appearances were sitting by the stone table, waiting quietly. 3 of them were demon race experts. There was the great demon Saint Ling Xian in a black robe, the 3rd demon Saint Shangtua, and a newly promoted demon saint, a bald man wearing a skull mask. As for the 4th person, it was An Yu, who wore silver armor and looked like a half-lion man. Ever since they decided on the plan to wait for the rabbit to appear, the 4 of them had been hiding in this secret room, patiently waiting. After a few days, none of them were in the mood to talk. They all closed their eyes and rested. At this moment, the stone door of the secret room opened. A guard commander walked in, his expression respectful as he walked to Ling Xian's side and bowed respectfully. Ling Xian opened his eyes and asked in a low voice, "It's been a few days. Is there still no movement?" The guard commander replied honestly, reporting to Great Demon Saint, "All of the guards are on high alert, guarding the perimeter of the godly mountain tightly. There is no trace of Ji Tianxing Biming Palace and the torture department are the key areas to be monitored, but there are no abnormalities." Ling Xian nodded slightly and asked expressionlessly, "Just now, I detected that someone went in and out of the torture department?" The guard commander was startled and quickly explained, "Great Demon Saint, it's a guard of Biming Palace. He was drunk last night and missed today's duty." After being reprimanded by the guard commander, this person took the opportunity to cause trouble and had a conflict with the guard commander. Thus, the captain of the guards invited 2 executioners to bring the guard to the torture department and punish him severely. Ling Xian frowned and his eyes flashed with anger. He warned in a dignified tone, "At such a critical moment, there are still people who let their guard down. Such a disregard for the law should be punished severely. Pass down the order, tell everyone to watch closely. If anyone makes a mistake, I will chop off his head." The guard commander quickly cupped his hands and said, "This subordinate obeys. This subordinate will take his leave." After bowing, he hurriedly retreated. The secret room returned to silence. An Yu, who was resting with his eyes closed, opened his eyes and looked at Ling Xian. He asked expressionlessly, "It's already the 6th day, but Ji Tianxing still hasn't appeared. I'm afraid he's scared out of his wits and doesn't dare to come." Saying this, the corner of his mouth hooked up in a self-deprecating smile. He shook his head and said, "But this is normal. Anyone with a brain would know that this is a trap. We were too confident and overestimated Ji Tianxing. Ling Xian frowned and didn't refute him. He smiled and said, Lord and you don't worry. Don't we still have 4 days? After 4 days, if Ji Tianxing still doesn't appear, we will think of other ways. He's in our hands, so we have the initiative. There will be a way to deal with him. And you nodded and didn't say anything else. Anyway, if the great demon Saint could deal with Ji Tianxing, he would help. If he had to go to Pillar of Heaven's mountains to deal with Ji Tianxing, he would definitely not agree. Unless the demon race paid 3 times the price. Ling Xian wanted to use him for his own selfish reasons. How could he not have selfish motives? How could he not be using the demon race? An hour later, Ji Tianxing finally found traces of Ji Ku, and only then did he stop casting the spell. If it was any other time, he would only need to use his divine sense to envelop the torture department, and he would be able to locate Ji Ku immediately. However, it was different now. There were elite soldiers inside and outside the torture department, and many sacred arrays were set up. There were also a few martial sages who were secretly using their divine sense to monitor this place. Once he used his divine sense, his identity would be exposed immediately. Therefore, he could only use his divine sense to sense the aura of the heavenly star chain. After all, he was the one who made the heavenly star chain, and no one knew it better than him. He could clearly sense that Ji Ku was imprisoned at the end of the 3rd passage on the right, in the most heavily guarded cell. There were many soldiers and ambushes inside and outside the cell. On the surface, there were more than 30 elite guards and more than 10 demon kings hiding in the dark. Once Ji Tianxing appeared, he would be surrounded immediately. If a fight broke out, the martial sages hiding in Baiming Palace would arrive instantly. Chapter 2262. Waiting was a long time. Waiting helplessly for time to pass was even more torturous. An entire day passed. Ji Tianxing had been in the prison all this time, thinking about how to start the rescue. He simulated more than 30 methods in his mind, making deductions and predictions. The result, without exception, was failure. No matter what method he used, it was impossible to deceive the public and get away with it. The final result was that he would be in danger with Ji Ku, besieged by many experts. I still have 4 days. I need to calm down and think carefully, see if I can find another way. If in the end I still can't find a safe way, I can only try my best. The devil saints of the devil race are nothing to worry about. Only you and the ancestor devil god can threaten me. The ancestor devil god is sleeping in the blood sea abyss, trying to break through to the deity realm. If the commotion caused by the battle is too great, it will definitely appear if it truly threatens the survival of the devil race. As for Yu, he colluded with the devil race. I wonder if he's in Baiming Palace? If he's not, then I have nothing to worry about. Ji Tianxing thought silently, still maintaining his calm, patiently looking for an opportunity. At the same time, on the desolate plain south of the devil race's divine mountain, a streak of icy blue light suddenly appeared in the sky filled with black mist. Whoosh! Like thunder, the blue light tore a huge crack in the dark sky. In the next moment, a ball of icy blue light wrapped around 2 graceful figures, appearing out of nowhere in the sky. These were 2 peerless, cold, and otherworldly women. One wore an icy blue dress, her hair in a noble bun, and wore an ice crystal crown, her aura sacred and noble. The other wore a snow-white dress, her face beautiful, her temperament cold and elegant. Both of them were tall, peerless beauties, like fairies that had descended from the 9 heavens. All the women in the world, regardless of race, would pale in front of these 2 peerless beauties, no matter how beautiful they were. Without a doubt, these 2 were Luoshui martial god and Yuniao. The 2 stood high in the sky on the icy blue light, looking down at the desolate plains below and the divine mountain ahead. Luoshui martial god's face was cold, his eyes deep and cold. Yuniao had a worried look on her face, and there was a deep anxiety between her brows. Divine Lord, we heard that Ji Ku is being held captive in Baiming Palace. Tianxing arrived 2 days earlier than us. He must have already started his operation. Yuniao said in a low voice as she looked at the pitch-black majestic palace at the peak of the sacred mountain. Luo Shui observed for a while before gently shaking his head. He said in a certain tone, from the looks of it, the entire divine mountain is rather peaceful. It does not seem like a great battle happened. Tianqing was not a reckless person. He would definitely not kill his way into Baiming Palace. Based on my understanding of him, he will definitely find a way to hide in Baiming Palace and wait for an opportunity to strike. Without enough confidence, he won't show himself. Yunyao also understood this and knew Ji Tianqing's style of doing things very well. However, when she heard Luo Shui's words, she could not help but cast a sideways glance at Luo Shui with a complicated gaze. Looks like the Divine Lord has already confirmed Tianqing's identity and knows that he's Kenshin's reincarnation. She agreed to come with me to save Tianqing without hesitation. I'm afraid that's also the reason. I wonder what kind of conflict there was between Kenshin and Divine Lord Luo Shui back then? At this moment, dozens of black shadows suddenly appeared on the grayish-brown wasteland. Swish, swish, swish. More than 80 demons in black armor emerged from the ground and flew up into the sky with a murderous look on their faces. Apparently Luo Shui and Yunyao had been discovered. However, the two of them had never planned to hide their tracks. With martial god Luo Shui present, they could attack Baiming Palace openly. What was there to be afraid of? Swish, swish, swish. In the blink of an eye, more than 80 black-armored guards rushed to Yunyao and Luo Shui and attacked with swords and knives. A cold light flashed in Luo Shui's eyes and he was about to counterattack. At this moment, Yunyao took a step forward and pulled out the reverse water divine sword. She said coldly, "Divine Lord, these minions are not worthy of your attack. Let me deal with them." Luo Shui nodded and said, "All right. You've just broken through to the martial sage realm. Let me see what you're capable of." By the time she finished speaking, Yunyao was already wielding the reverse water divine sword, transforming into an icy blue light as she charged towards the group of black-armored guards. Sky Star Rain. Yunyao formed a sword art with her left hand and waved the reverse water divine sword with her right hand. Her clothes fluttered and starlight filled the sky. At this moment, she had the peerless elegance of a fairy and the majestic aura of a peerless goddess. She was simply perfect. The starlight in the sky bloomed and turned into hundreds of dazzling meteors that fell from the sky. More than 80 black-armored guards were immediately drowned by the meteors in the sky. Bam! 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 A series of muffled sounds echoed in the sky above the wasteland. The attacks of the guards were directly smashed by the meteors. Then the dazzling meteors blasted the crowd into pieces. Blood and flesh splattered everywhere. Those who were hit by the starlight could not escape the fate of having their physical bodies and spiritual souls shattered. They did not even have the time to scream before they were killed by the meteors in the sky. Boom! 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 The meteors in the sky landed on the wasteland and created hundreds of deep holes in the ground. They connected to form a huge abyss. Monstrous clouds of dust flew out, covering the sky for 300 miles. The ground shook violently and cracks appeared. The sacred mountain, which was a few hundred miles away, was also affected and shook violently. Yunyao kept the reverse water divine sword and looked down at the ground expressionlessly. There was nothing in the sky in front of her. More than 80 black-armored guards had turned into pieces of flesh and blood and scattered in the ruins and deep holes. She had only used one move to kill more than 80 demon clan guards in an instant. Such terrifying combat strength was not much weaker than Ji Tianqing's. Luo Shui watched carefully. Her eyes lit up and a trace of gratification appeared on her delicate face. Very good. She nodded to Yunyao and stepped across the sky. She took Yunyao and went straight to Baiming Palace. At the same time, the guards and powerhouses in Baiming Palace were alarmed. Thousands of elite demon clan guards were lying in ambush on the majestic sacred mountain. Everyone quickly activated the mountain protection array and activated a blood-red light shield with a radius of 300 miles to envelop the sacred mountain. At the same time, more than 500 black-armored guards were divided into more than a dozen teams. They rushed murderously toward Yunyao and Luo Shui to intercept them. Yunyao's eyes immediately turned cold. She held the reverse water divine sword and rushed forward fearlessly to meet the attack. Luo Shui followed closely behind. She waved her hand and shot out ice blue light pillars to kill those black-armored guards. Of course, she was always paying attention to Yunyao's situation and would never let her get hurt. Chapter 2263. two peerless beauties gentle as water, faced more than 500 fiendish demon guards. It was a weird scene. But what was even weirder was that the two beauties were invincible. But those fierce and ferocious devil guards fell from the sky and landed on the wasteland like dumplings in a pot. In just 100 breaths of time the battle was over. Only Luo Shui and Yunyao were left in the sky. Both of them were safe and sound. Aside from the bloodstains on their clothes, they were unharmed. More than 500 demon guards were all turned into minced meat, scattering on the wasteland. No one was left alive, and no divine soul could escape. Such a horrible scene fell into the eyes of many demon guards. Suddenly, the remaining hundreds of demon guards all hid on the mountain, not daring to rush out of the mountain guarding array. In the Beiming Palace on the mountain peak, the warning horn sounded. Several thousand demon race experts and elites quickly gathered together, assuming the most vigilant defensive posture. Everyone knew that a strong enemy was coming, and a great disaster was coming. Not only that, even Ling Xian and Yu, and the others who had been hiding in the secret chamber were alarmed. Everyone suddenly opened their eyes. They looked at each other and sneered. Ling Xian said meaningfully, listening to the noise outside, "It should be him. Lord and Yu, I have said that he will definitely come." And Yu nodded with a smile and said with a murderous look, "In that case, let's end this quickly, and get rid of this big trouble as soon as possible." Ba Tua and the big bald demon saint also rubbed their hands, and murderous aura surged from their bodies. "Let's go and meet him." Ling Xian waved his hand, and led everyone out of the secret chamber. After a while, the four of them came to the square outside the Beiming Palace, and looked down at the situation at the foot of the mountain. Around the square, near the blood-red light shield, a large number of demon guards and elite experts gathered, and they were all ready for battle. When a guard captain saw Ling Xian and the others appear, he quickly went up to them and bowed respectfully. Ling Xian looked down the mountain and asked in a dignified tone, "What happened just now? Is Ji Tianqing here to kill us?" The leader of the guards was startled for a second, then he said in a strange tone, reporting to the great demon saint, "There are indeed two powerful warriors who have killed hundreds of guards in just a few moves. But those two people are not Ji Tianqing. They are two human women." Suddenly hearing this news, Ling Xian suddenly frowned, and his expression became somewhat puzzled. "Ji Tianqing didn't come? Were there only two women? Are you sure you're not mistaken?" The guard captain hurriedly nodded and said in a confident tone, "Great Devil Saint, how could this subordinate be wrong? Those two women swaggered over and everyone saw it with their own eyes." Ling Xian's expression became more and more unsightly as he muttered to himself, "Ji Tianqing didn't appear, but he let these two women come here openly? What was he trying to do? Was this a covert scheme? Who were those two women? Martial God Luo Shui?" As he thought of this, a hint of fear and worry flashed across his eyes. However, he glanced at Yu beside him, and immediately felt much more at ease. With Yu, a God Realm warrior, there should be no problem even if the ancestor demon god didn't appear. Ling Xian thought in his heart, and dispelled his worries. At this moment, an icy blue and a silver-white dazzling light flew over from the sky above the wasteland. Swoosh! Swoosh! In the blink of an eye, the two dazzling lights flew to the peak of the sacred mountain and stopped. After the light faded, two graceful and cold figures appeared. Luo Shui and Yunyao stood in the sky, 3,000 feet away from Ling Xian and the others, separated by a layer of blood-red light shield. Although there were only two of them, facing the entire sacred mountain and thousands of demon warriors, they didn't show any fear or worry. On the contrary, their auras were quite strong and domineering, and they didn't take the others seriously at all. And Yu Matua and the others all realized that something was wrong, and frowned in confusion. Why are there two women? Where's Ji Tianqing? Didn't he kill his way here? Why don't I see him? Ling Xian also frowned and muttered to himself, "Damn it, Luo Shui is really here. That bitch, she has to stick her nose in everything. If Yu can kill her, it would be great." Ling Xian didn't forget that half a year ago, Luo Shui only sent a clone here, and it brought disaster to Beiming Palace. Now that Luo Shui's real body was here, wouldn't it turn the world upside down? Thinking of this, Ling Xian looked at Yu and transmitted his voice, "Lord Yu, those two women are not simple. The one in the white dress is Ji Tianqing's wife. The woman in the blue dress is the Luo Shui Divine Nation's Divine Master, the Luo Shui Martial God. If we can kill Luo Shui, the Luo Shui Divine Nation will definitely fall apart, and we can immediately lead our troops south to seize the endless territories. Of course, the Luo Shui Divine Nation is the weakest among the three divine nations. Luo Shui's strength is also the weakest among the three martial gods, and he doesn't pose a threat to you at all. Ling Xian said it casually, but he deliberately exaggerated the gains from killing Luo Shui in order to instigate Enyu. However, Enyu had suffered at his hands before, so how could he be so easily fooled? Oh, is that so? Enyu raised his eyebrows and a playful smile appeared on his face, but he didn't say anything else. He didn't pay attention to Luo Shui's strength, nor did he care about the temptation Ling Xian mentioned. In any case, he acted as if it had nothing to do with him, and he wasn't in a hurry to make a move. Ling Xian saw through his thoughts and couldn't help but feel angry, but he couldn't be too hasty. At this moment, Luo Shui looked down at Baiming Palace from above, and said in a cold voice, Ling Xian, this god came here today only to say one thing. Listen well. Immediately hand over Ji Tianqing and Ji Ku, and this god can treat it as if nothing happened. Otherwise, this god doesn't mind destroying the entire divine mountain. The cold and deep voice spread throughout the entire divine mountain, and reverberated between the heavens and the earth. The formless divine sense pressure caused many of the demon race experts to feel fear, and their faces showed fear. Ling Xian didn't doubt Luo Shen's words at all. Previously, Luo Shen had only sent a clone, and it had destroyed Baiming Palace. Now that his real body had arrived, destroying the divine mountain would be a piece of cake. However, Ling Xian had an idea, and he immediately had an idea. He looked at Luo Shui with a cold smile, and with an arrogant attitude, he laughed wildly and said, ha ha ha, Luo Shui, you are too arrogant, and you must be blind. Why don't you see who is beside this lord? This is Lord Enyu, a true God realm expert. With Lord Enyu here, don't you dare be presumptuous, or else you will die on the spot. Ling Xian's aura was very confident and overbearing. However, Enyu, who was beside him, immediately frowned, and his face was as black as the bottom of a pot, and his eyes flashed with a cold light. Chapter 2264. Ling Xian's words were indeed effective. Luo Shui immediately frowned and looked at Enyu beside him. His cold eyes were filled with intense hostility and murderous intent. Enyu knew that it would be difficult for him to escape today. He cursed Ling Xian in his heart for being despicable, but he could not fall out with him on the spot. He could only remain silent. At this moment, Luo Shui coldly shouted, Ling Xian, I gave you a chance. Since you're so eager, I'll fulfill your wish. As her voice fell, she waved her palms and sent out two mountain-sized icy blue palm shadows toward the blood-red light shield. Back then, in order to avenge Luo Li, she had sent her doppelganger here and destroyed Baiming Palace. Of course, she knew that the protective array of the sacred mountain was a holy array. Only the abyss of the blood sea behind the sacred mountain was protected by a divine array. Bam! Bam! With a deafening sound, the two icy blue palm shadows slammed into the blood-red light shield. Instantly, the blood-red light shield within a radius of 300 miles trembled violently from the impact. Layers of ripples spread out. The icy blue palm shadows shattered and turned into cold light that scattered in the sky. However, the places that were hit by the icy blue palm shadows had also sunk into two huge craters, and the surroundings were filled with dense cracks. At most, 2 more hits and the blood-red light shield would be smashed to pieces. Seeing this scene, the thousands of demon elites on the sacred mountain were shocked and worried. The expressions of Ling Xian, Ma Tuo, and the others also changed drastically, revealing deep worry. Without hesitation, Luo Shui raised her hands again and punched the blood-red light shield. Endless icy blue brilliance crazily accumulated in her fists and condensed into 2 palace-sized fist lights. The fist lights were condensed to the extreme and seemed to be solid. They emitted a bone-chilling aura and contained the power to destroy heaven and earth. Boom! Crack! When the 2 fist lights hit the blood-red light shield, an earth-shattering explosion sounded in the sky and spread for thousands of miles. 2 huge holes were blasted into the huge blood-red light shield on the spot. The cracks in the surroundings quickly spread out like a spider web. Endless icy blue brilliance and blood-red light shards burst out in the sky and spread out along with the shock wave. The mountain-protecting grand array of the sacred mountain was thus destroyed by Luo Shui. Shi and Yunyao's figures flashed and were about to enter the two gaps. When he saw this, Ling Xian immediately shouted anxiously, "Quickly stop them. We can't let them enter the divine mountain." He was well aware that Yunyao was one thing, but once Luo Shui entered the divine mountain, the consequences would be unimaginable. The shockwaves from the battle between the two sides were absolutely destructive, enough to destroy Beiming Palace once again. In fact, the entire divine mountain would be razed to the ground. At that time, the demon race would suffer heavy losses, and it would not be as simple as losing a few thousand elite guards. However, Ling Xian's angry shout rang out, and the order was passed down. None of the thousands of elite experts and guards around the square dared to move. Previously, everyone had witnessed Luo Shui and Yunyao killing more than 500 guards in an instant. Who would be so stupid as to rush out and throw away their lives? When Ling Xian saw that the guards were timid and afraid, he was filled with rage. He rushed into the sky with Ba Tuo and the newly promoted demon saint. "Luo Shui, I will not repeat the same mistake today. Don't you dare act atrociously here." As he spoke, he did not forget to send a voice transmission to Enyu. "Lord Enyu, this woman is one of the three martial gods. No matter what, you must stop her. If you let her destroy our plan, then our cooperation will be gone, and your situation will be worrying." In fact, even if Ling Xian did not remind him, Enyu understood this point. After all, he was an invader. If he wanted to gain a foothold here, he needed the help of the demon race. Therefore, he also flew into the sky without hesitation and waved his hand to attack Luo Shui. "Crimson Moon kill!" Enyu shouted in a low voice. His eyes turned into two dark red flames that flickered. His body surged with a dark red brilliance that soared into the sky. His palms shot out endless killing intent, condensing into a huge crimson moon that blasted towards Luo Shui. Ling Xian, Ba Tuo, and Baldi also used their secret techniques, releasing a bloody light that covered the sky and earth, enveloping Luo Shui's figure. Luo Shui was surrounded by four powerhouses, but she was still fearless. Her body emitted an icy brilliance as she coldly shouted with an expressionless face, "Virtuous like water, the will of heaven punishes the demon." As she spoke, her palm struck out a mysterious spell, drawing a dazzling blue light in front of her. Finally, when she put her palms together in front of her chest, her entire body burst forth with endless icy blue light. Boom! Following a deafening explosion, a monstrous cold light exploded like a mushroom cloud. The bloody light and demonic shadows that filled the sky were instantly dispersed by the icy blue brilliance. Even the crimson moon that Enyu had released was shattered on the spot. Instantly, Enyu, Ling Xian, Ba Tuo, and the others were all sent flying by Luo Shui, their faces full of shock. Especially Enyu, his eyes suddenly widened as he shouted in disbelief, "Luo Shui, the weakest of the three martial gods, actually has such powerful strength?" At this moment, he suddenly doubted Ling Xian's words. There was only one thought in his mind. Ling Xian was a complete liar and scoundrel. Not a single word from his mouth could be trusted. However, now was not the time to pursue this matter. Since Enyu wanted to cooperate with the demon race, he had to stand on the same side as Ling Xian. He was very unconvinced and charged at Luo Shui once again, pulling out the dark red sword at his waist and slashing out several sword lights that could split the heavens and earth. The blood-red sword lights were very strange and contained an invisible power, as if controlling the heavens and earth to suppress Luo Shui. Luo Shui felt the pressure increase. Only now did she realize that Enyu's methods were extraordinary, and that the power he used was also very strange. She solemnly waved her hand and struck out a mysterious spell, slapping out hundreds of icy blue seals with her palms. Ling Xian also charged over, releasing a monstrous sea of blood and 9 demonic shadows to surround Luo Shui. Bang bang bang! The icy blue seals and the blood-red sword lights collided, creating a loud explosion. Just as the blood-red sword lights were defeated, Ling Xian's spell attack struck Luo Shui. She was besieged and had no choice but to use her secret skills to block and counterattack. Ling Xian and An Yu temporarily stabilized their position and methodically launched their attacks to restrain Luo Shui. On the other side, Ba Tuo and the Big Ball Demon Saint knew that they could not threaten Luo Shui, so they joined forces to attack Yun Yao. From their point of view, Yun Yao had just broken through to the martial sage realm and only had the strength of a rank 1 martial sage. She should not be difficult to deal with. If they could take Yun Yao down, they could use her life to threaten Luo Shui. This way there would be a turn for the better. However, when the two of them joined forces to attack Yun Yao, they realized that things were not as they had imagined. Although Yun Yao only had the strength of a rank 1 martial sage, her combat strength was extremely strong. Not only had he mastered all kinds of secret techniques, but he also had a genuine divine sword. Chapter 2265. An Yu and Ling Xian besieged Luo Shui. Ba Tuo and Abaldi besieged Yun Yao. The two sides fought fiercely in the sky above the wilderness. The sky fell and the earth cracked, and the sun and moon lost their light. The violent and devastating shockwaves spread in all directions like stormy waves. The deafening noises kept exploding, reverberating between heaven and earth. Thousands of demon guards and elites were holed up on the sacred mountain to watch the battle. A battle of this level was not something they could interfere with. Even if they were caught in the aftermath of the battle, they might die on the spot. Inside the Department of Torture, since the commotion of the battle spread, many guards hurried to the outside of Baiming Palace. The experts and powerhouses lying in ambush were also on high alert, guarding against the invasion of foreign enemies at all times. As a result, the internal defense power of the Department of Torture was weakened by a lot. Soon, a quarter of an hour passed. The battle outside had not stopped, and it was becoming more and more intense. The entire sacred mountain kept shaking, causing the demons inside and outside the Department of Torture to feel uneasy. At the same time, Ji Tianqing, who had been silent all this time, suddenly opened his eyes. He looked towards the south with bright eyes, as if his eyes could see through the palace and darkness, and saw the battle in the sky above the wilderness. The earth-shattering sounds of battle and the surging waves of dermic powers were extremely familiar to him. It's Luo Shui and Yao Yao. Why are they here? His expression changed immediately, and his eyes flashed with deep surprise. He immediately understood after thinking for a while. I clearly trapped Yao Yao in the secret room. Could it be that she broke my array and escaped from the secret room? As for Luo Shui, Yao Yao must have invited him. Thinking of this, his mood was very complicated. He felt both guilty and touched. Luo Shui and Yao Yao are fighting with Ling Xian and An Yu, attracting everyone's attention. This is the best opportunity for me. Ji Tianqing no longer hesitated and attacked without hesitation. His whole body lit up with a bright golden light, and he suddenly burst out with a surging power. With a series of ding-ding-ding sounds, the chains wrapped around his body instantly shattered into a pile of debris. His figure flashed and rushed to the door of the cell. He kicked the door made of magic iron. Clang! The pitch-black door, which was more than 3 meters tall, was directly kicked away by him and twisted into a ball like a fried dough twist. The sudden turn of events woke up the guards at the entrance of the passage. The guards in blood-red armor roared angrily and rushed over while brandishing their swords and sabers. Ji Tianqing turned into a black shadow and rushed forward as fast as lightning. Swish! Swish! As he passed through the crowd, he flicked out golden sword chi from all 10 of his fingers, stabbing at the guards' foreheads. The next moment, he rushed out of the dark passage and disappeared into the darkness. As for the guards, their bodies stiffened as they stood rooted to the ground. After a while, they fell to the ground with a thud, their vitality completely gone. There was a finger-sized bloody hole in each of their foreheads, and demon blood was constantly flowing out. The sword chi released by Ji Tianqing pierced through their foreheads and directly destroyed their divine souls. Clean and neat, fast, ruthless, and accurate. After 2 breaths, Ji Tianqing turned into a black shadow and rushed into the third passage. At the end of this passage, there was a spacious cell where Ji Ku was imprisoned. The passage and the outside of the cell were heavily guarded, and there were more than a dozen tribulation stage demon lords among them. When Ji Tianqing rushed into the passage, the guards had already realized that the situation was not good. More than a dozen armored guards, waving their swords and halberds, rushed over murderously. At this moment, Ji Tianqing no longer had any scruples. There was no need for him to hide his identity and strength. "You're courting death." A cold light flashed in his eyes as he shouted in a low voice. At the same time, his body turned into an illusory black shadow and rushed toward the group of guards with rolling thunder and sword light. Swoosh! 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 A burst of dazzling sword light flashed, accompanied by the sound of thunder, illuminating the passage. When his figure rushed to the door of the cell, the dozen guards had already fallen to the ground. All of them were covered in blood, and there were many broken limbs scattered on the ground. Their divine souls had been destroyed by Ji Tianqing, and they were all dead. Ji Tianqing rushed to the door of the cell and looked at the black stone door. The door of this cell had obviously been specially modified, and there were several saint-level array formations on it. Even if Ji Tianqing wanted to break the array, it would not be possible in a short time. Moreover, the 10 demon lords lying in ambush outside the door had already released earth-shattering Dharma spells. A few demonic dragons condensed from blood-red light and dozens of sword shadows surged over like a monstrous flood, immediately drowning his figure. Ji Tianqing's body bloomed with golden light, forming an oval shield. Boom! 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 A series of muffled explosions reverberated in the tunnel. The attacks of the 10 demon lords were all blocked by the golden shield, and they could not hurt Ji Tianqing at all. A powerful and violent shockwave exploded in the tunnel, causing cracks to appear on the ground and walls. The entire torture department began to shake from the tremors. There were a few blood-armored guards around, but they only had the strength of the Essence Soul Realm, and they were shattered on the spot. The 10 demon lords did not stop, and once again released terrifying Dharma spells, blasting toward Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing was completely enraged. A black light flashed in his right palm, and he drew out the Sword of Burial of Heaven. 7 Stars Sword. With a furious roar, he swung his sword and slashed out 49 starry sword lights at the 10 demon monarchs of various forms. Swish! 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 The dazzling sword lights were like shooting stars cutting through the darkness, blooming with the most dazzling brilliance. In the blink of an eye, those demon lords wearing black robes, armor, or looking like demonic beasts were torn apart by the sword lights. The bodies of the 10 demon lords were destroyed, and none of them were spared. The souls of 6 of them were also killed, and only 4 souls escaped in a sorry state. Ji Tianqing did not chase after them. He stared coldly at the door of the cell, holding the Sword of Burial of Heaven with both hands, and slashed down fiercely. "Open for me!" Boom! Crack! Amidst a deafening boom, the starry sword light, which was 100 feet long, split the door of the cell in half, and shattered rocks flew everywhere. The terrifying impact caused half of the torture department to collapse, turning it into a pile of ruins. Ji Tianqing passed through the broken stone door, ignoring the falling rocks, and rushed into the cell. He saw a blood-stained copper pillar on the altar in the corner of the cell. A woman with disheveled hair and bloody body was tied to the copper pillar by a dozen chains. She had suffered some kind of cruel torture, and she did not look human, and she was unconscious. Chapter 2266. Without a doubt, that bloodied, frail woman was Ji Ku. Moreover, the 8 demon lords also had the mission of destroying the corpse. Ling Xian had already made plans. If Ji Tianqing were to rush here to save Ji Ku, he would not be able to escape. Those 8 demon lords were about to activate the array and use the soul-incinerating purple fire to completely kill Ji Ku. Ji Tianqing instantly understood when he saw this scene. A towering fury immediately exploded in his chest. His eyes were as red as blood, and his entire body surged with towering fury. Die! He roared like a great bell and brazenly charged at the 8 demon lords like a raging ball of bloody fire. Duanyu! Heaven-seizing palm. He recklessly swung the Sword of Burial of Heaven, and slashed out 2 dark golden sword lights at the 4 demon lords on the left. His left hand fiercely swatted out a golden dragon claw at the 4 demon lords on the right. The 2 sides were too close, and Ji Tianqing's furious attack was also extremely fast. Those 8 demon lords were unable to dodge at all, and were instantly struck by the sword lights and dragon claws. Bam bam bam. A deafening boom exploded like the rumbling of thunder. 3 demon lords were cut in half by the sword lights, and dark purple demon blood spurted out. The other 4 demon lords were directly smashed into meat paste by the dragon claws. The last demon lord was relatively luckier and scrambled to hide in a corner of the cell. Before he could rejoice, Ji Tianqing stabbed him in the forehead. His head exploded, and his soul shattered on the spot. He died on the spot. At the same time, a destructive shockwave spread out in all directions, instantly shattering the entire prison cell. With a loud rumble, the torture department that was on the verge of collapse finally collapsed. Countless ravines split open in the ground, and the palace collapsed, smashing down countless rocks and bricks. Within a radius of 3,000 meters, only broken walls and rubble remained. Endless smoke and dust soared into the sky, obscuring this area in a state of chaos. However, amidst the surging gray fog, there was a dark purple flame that was more than 10 meters tall that was particularly eye-catching. It was the bone-chilling, terrifying soul-incinerating purple flame. Not only could the fire burn up flesh and blood, the most vicious effect of the fire was that it could penetrate the protection of the body and magical equipment and directly burn the soul. Obviously, Ji Tianqing was still one step behind. Before the 8 demon monarchs died, they successfully activated the array on the altar and released the soul-burning purple fire. Their mission was to not let Ji-Ke live even if they had to die on the spot. Shua! Ji Tianqing passed through the smoke and gravel, rushing to the front of the soul-burning purple flame. He watched helplessly as the 3 zhongtal purple torch enveloped Ji-Ke's body. Her blood-stained robes and long hair were instantly burned to ashes by the purple flames. In the next moment, her body would be reduced to ashes. Ji Tianqing's heart was burning with anxiety. He immediately made a hand seal and released rays of starlight into Ji-Ke's body. Star attraction art. In the next moment, the heavenly star chain in Ji-Ke's mind was awakened and activated by him. Shua! The heavenly star chain burst out with cold, dazzling starlight, enveloping Ji-Ke from the inside out. The starlight formed an oval-shaped shield, protecting Ji-Ke and isolating her from the soul-incinerating purple flame. She was temporarily safe. Ji Tianqing finally heaved a sigh of relief. He hurriedly activated the power of the heaven-mending orb and struck out a dense white light with his palm. Whoosh! The sacred and majestic white light enveloped the 3 zhongtal soul-incinerating purple flame and quickly devoured it. The surging soul-incinerating purple flame instantly disappeared at a speed visible to the naked eye, and was extinguished in the blink of an eye. Ji Tianqing hurriedly took out the sword of burial of heaven and cut off the chains around Ji-Ke's body. He then carried her down from the copper pillar. Only then did he realize that the copper pillar was covered in chopstick-long spikes that had pierced Ji-Ke's back full of hideous bloody holes. Cuckoo! Ji Tianqing was both furious and distressed. He couldn't help but exclaim in a low voice. However, Ji-Ke's soul was too heavily injured. She was still unconscious and had yet to wake up. Ji Tianqing turned his head and looked around. He saw hundreds of demon race experts rushing over from all directions. The demon race guards and elite experts charged over with murderous intent, letting out deafening battle cries. He didn't have the time to save Ji-Ke. He could only put her into the Sword World and have the Golden Mountain King settle her down in peaceful Earth City. Then he sent an order to Ancestor Sanju, telling him to hurry to peaceful Earth City and treat Ji-Ke's injuries. By the time he finished arranging everything, more than 800 demon race guards and experts had already closed in and surrounded the ruins. Kill! Kill him! This person isn't one of us. He's Ji Tianqing in disguise. Everyone, don't hold back. Work together and kill him. The captain of the guards and the demon monarchs shouted at the top of their lungs. Ji Tianqing lowered his head and glanced at himself. A man's physical body was already in tatters. He simply abandoned this body and took out his main body from the sword world. Whoosh! In a flash of light, his soul returned to his main body. He transformed into a handsome white-robed youth and appeared in the air above the ruins. The badly mutilated body of the demon lay powerlessly in the ruins, covered by dust. Ji Tianqing placed his left hand behind his back and gripped the sword of burial of heaven with his right hand. His sharp gaze swept over the surroundings. Everyone must die, he shouted darkly, his body erupting with killing intent that could shake the heavens. It had been many years since he had been so angry. His killing intent had almost taken over his mind. Jika's tragic fate filled his chest with endless anger and killing intent. Only by killing all the demons on Divine Mountain could he calm down a little. He suddenly raised the sword of burial of heaven and pointed it at the dark sky. He roared, 10,000 swords of stars, heed my command. Kill! Hearing his words and seeing his reaction, many demons were stunned. Everyone frowned in confusion, not understanding what he was doing. Just by pointing his sword at the sky and shouting he could kill people? Everyone scratched their heads in confusion. Only a few demon clan experts immediately had a bad premonition, and a strong sense of fear rose in their hearts. In the next moment, the dark sky suddenly lit up with starlight like the stars of a summer night. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Tens of thousands of rays of starlight fell like meteors, carrying with them the power to destroy the world. At the peak of Divine Mountain, the night sky within 1,000 miles was immediately illuminated. Only now did the demons realize that it was tens of thousands of giant swords of stars. Everyone was shocked and wanted to turn and flee. But the invisible sword essence that suppressed the world enveloped everyone and made them unable to move. Boom, 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 boom. There was an earth-shaking explosion. Tens of thousands of sword lights came down and instantly drowned out the ruins, including the nearby Beiming Palace. Immediately, thousands of demons were drowned in starlight and turned into dregs by the sword lights. They died without a complete corpse. The torture department also ceased to exist. The ruins on the ground turned into endless smoke and dust, leaving behind only a huge abyss-like pit. Chapter 2267. Before this, all the demons knew that Ji Tianqing was the greatest enemy of the demon race. This person was extremely strong. On the northern battlefield, he had once slaughtered millions of demons. But just how strong was he? The demons on the Divine Mountain had never seen it with their own eyes and did not have a clear idea. After all, they had not rushed to the front lines to participate in the war. Now they finally saw it with their own eyes. Ji Tianqing only used one sword move to command 10,000 starry sword lights to instantly kill thousands of elite demons. Not only was the torture department completely destroyed, even more than half of Beiming Palace was destroyed and turned into ruins. Such a terrifying and peerless power left everyone dumbstruck. When they came back to their senses, only endless fear and lingering fear remained in their hearts. Many people even secretly rejoiced that they had not been in the torture department so that they could live until now. Even though the demons were cold-blooded, cruel, brave, and violent, but in the end they were still intelligent creatures, and they would still feel fear. After a long while, when the dust and magic power in the sky had dissipated, Ji Tianqing's figure appeared and stood murderously in the sky. He looked coldly in the distance at the demon guards and experts near Beiming Palace. Wherever he looked, the guards and experts of the devil race subconsciously backed away. Such a scene made many demons feel deeply humiliated. Dozens of hot-blooded and fearless devils couldn't bear this silent humiliation. They shouted and dashed towards Ji Tianqing. Everyone, don't be afraid, let's attack together. For the glory of our race we will not retreat. Kill. No matter how strong he is only one person. We have many people, we are not afraid of him. Don't forget the great demon saint's reward. Whoever kills him will be given the position of deputy commander and 500 million in cultivation resources. More than 40 demon experts charged at Ji Tianqing without any regard for their own safety, not forgetting to shout at the top of their lungs. But they were immediately met with tragedy. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Ji Tianqing waved his right hand and raised the burial of heaven, sending out dozens of cold lights. More than 80 starry sword rays instantly streaked across the sky and pierced those devil experts. With a series of pong 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 muffled sounds, more than 40 demon experts were torn into pieces by the sword light on the spot. Flesh and blood swirled in the air, and the dazzling sword light interweaved to form a magnificent and shocking scene. With a single move, everyone was smashed into pieces, their bodies and souls destroyed. Seeing the fate of these demon race experts, everyone kept quiet out of fear, a chill running down their spines. Originally, there were still a few demons who were infected by their hot-bloodedness, and a strong fighting spirit ignited in their hearts. However, after witnessing the tragic deaths of these people, their hot-bloodedness and fighting spirit were instantly extinguished. Ji Tianqing's murderous aura still hadn't dissipated. He turned into a golden shadow and rushed into the crowd, starting a massacre. Swing your sword. Heaven-cleaving sword. Heavenly dragon palm. Broken moon sword. He waved the sword of burial of heaven with his right hand and slashed out an earth-shattering sword light. His left palm struck out an enormous dark golden dragon claw, continuously slamming into the crowd. Loud rumbling sounds erupted continuously, reverberating endlessly on the mountain peak. Dazzling spell light also illuminated the peak of the divine mountain. Violent shock waves spread out in all directions, blowing up the gravel and dust on the ground. In a short 10 breaths of time, the crowd was scattered in all directions. 80% of the demon race were killed on the spot, dying without an intact corpse, turning into dregs all over the ground. There weren't many survivors left, and they were also scared out of their wits, fleeing in panic. In the eyes of the demon race, Ji Tianqing, this white-clothed killing god, was more terrifying than the world's most terrifying devil. Apart from the great fiend sage and the ancestral fiend god, probably no one could stop him. But Ji Tianqing didn't let those demon race go. Holding the sword of burial of heaven, he pursued and killed. Boom! Boom boom! Bang 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 bang! Sword light bloomed unceasingly, and muffled sounds rang out continuously. Batch after batch of demon race collapsed in a pool of blood, dying miserably. Ji Tianqing went on a killing spree on the mountain peak, as if he entered a no-man's land, sweeping everything before him. About 15 minutes later, he killed more than 2,000 demon race members in succession. The few hundred demon race members who were lucky enough to survive all fled in all directions, hiding in various concealed places on the divine mountain. If he pursued them one by one, it would definitely waste a lot of time. Ji Tianqing didn't want to waste time, so he gave up on the pursuit. He raised his head to look at the bloody light barrier in the sky with a radius of 150 kilometers. Heaven-splitting sword. He held the sword of burial of heaven with both hands and unleashed all of his power, slashing out a 1,000-foot-long giant sword with all his might. Bam! The dark golden giant sword ruthlessly struck the bloody light barrier, exploding with an earth-shaking bang. Immediately, a huge crack was split open on the bloody light barrier. Ji Tianqing's figure flashed, passing through that crack, and flew to the sky above the wasteland. He frowned as he looked in front of him, seeing in Yu Lingxian and the rest besieging Luo Shui and Yuniao. Luo Shui was fighting against two opponents, but he wasn't at a disadvantage at all. He was actually able to fend off in Yu and Lingxian's attacks. Her blue dress was stained with a few streaks of blood, as if she was slightly injured. However, and Yu and Lingxian were severely injured, their bodies covered in blood. Especially Lingxian, there were at least 10 wounds on his body, all of which were so deep that his bones could be seen. His black robe had long been soaked in dark purple demon blood. However, Yuniao was in a precarious situation. She was besieged by Matua and Debaldi, and even with the water-reversed divine sword, she was at a disadvantage. After all, she had just broken through to the martial sage realm. Matua was a rank 7 martial sage, while Debaldi was a rank 2 martial sage. Seeing this, Ji Tianqing didn't hesitate to rush over and join the battle. 5-colored divine lightning. He teleported behind Debaldi, and his left palm shot out a 5-colored lightning beam. He waved the sword of burial of heaven with his right hand, and a dazzling cold radiance shot out. Debaldi sensed that he was about to die, and his expression changed drastically. He waved a pair of large hatchets, and a blood-red radiance filled the sky. Bam! With a muffled sound, the blood-red light blade blocked the 5-colored divine lightning, and sparks filled the sky. Debaldi heaved a sigh of relief, thinking that he had dodged a bullet. However, in the next instant he felt a sharp pain in his chest, and his expression changed. Boom! A cluster of dazzling starlight suddenly exploded in his chest, turning into a huge mushroom cloud that soared into the sky. Debaldi's sturdy body was instantly smashed into pieces, and a large amount of blood splattered out. A dazzling purple spiritual soul flew out from the broken pieces of the blood rain and ran away in a panic. Originally, he had wanted to run back to the holy mountain to heal himself. However, the peak of the holy mountain was a mess, and Biming Palace and the punishment department had been destroyed. He didn't dare to run back to the holy mountain, as that would be suicide. However, even if he ran to the empty north, it would be useless. Ji Tianqing teleported and caught up with Debaldi, and he waved his sword. Bam! Chapter 2268. After Baldi was killed, only Ma Tuo was left. The pressure on Yunyao was greatly reduced. She waved the reverse water divine sword and slashed out sword shadows. She was locked in a fierce battle with Ma Tuo. Ji Tianqing turned around and charged toward Ma Tuo with his sword. He joined forces with Yunyao to deal with him. The two of them performed their ultimate sword techniques. Sword shadows covered the sky and drowned Ma Tuo's figure. Ma Tuo was instantly in a life-or-death situation. He was forced to retreat as he withstood the thousands of sword lights. Even so, he was still covered in wounds and bloody holes from the stabbing of the sword light. After a short 10 breaths, Ma Tuo was sent flying by Ji Tianqing's sword after exchanging a few blows. There was a terrifying gash in his chest. His ribs and internal organs were clearly visible. Dark purple demon blood gushed out like spring water and sprinkled in the sky. The heart-wrenching pain caused him to let out a shrill scream that resounded through the sky. His strength had weakened a lot due to his serious injuries. His fighting spirit was gradually fading. Yunyao alone was enough to deal with him. With Ji Tianqing, who was invincible below the martial god realm, there was only death for him. Thinking of this, he wanted to retreat. He wanted to turn around and run. On the other side, Ling Xian and Yu could barely fight Luo Shui to a draw. Ling Xian was only half a step away from the divine realm, and Yu was a genuine martial god realm expert. When the two of them attacked, and Yu was the main force and Ling Xian was the support. According to the current situation, Ling Xian would be killed in half an hour at most. And Yu would also be injured by Luo Shui. Although he would not be killed, he could only run for his life. At this moment, a furious roar suddenly rang out from the abyss of the sea of blood behind the divine mountain. Roar! The deep and powerful roar contained endless anger and killing intent. The thousands of demons at the peak of the sacred mountain were all in awe when they heard the roar. They all looked toward the back of the sacred mountain. In the next moment, an overwhelming dark red light rose from the blood sea abyss. A figure as huge as a mountain and as black as ink rose into the sky. It was 3,000 feet tall. It was like a huge black mountain. Its body was terrifyingly strong, and it emitted overwhelming demonic qi. It opened its mouth and spat out endless demonic clouds that covered thousands of miles. The area immediately became a gloomy ghost realm. The world was pitch black. Only, this towering ogre that had suddenly appeared had the appearance of a minotaur. It had 3 heads as big as mountains and 6 pairs of blade-like wings on its back. They were half black and half red. His 4 muscular arms contained the power to destroy the world. It was as if he could crush a mountain and shatter the stars in the sky. When this giant devil appeared, everyone stopped fighting at the same time. At the top of the mountain, the thousands of surviving demon clansmen all looked relieved and excited. They all knelt down and kowtowed to Li Mu. Welcome, Ancestor Fiend Celestial. In the sky, Ling Xian, Batua and the rest were also overjoyed. They smiled as if they had survived a disaster. They also bowed respectfully to the Ancestor Fiend Celestial. In their minds, since the Ancestor Fiend Celestial had appeared, he must have broken through to the deity realm. In that case, Luo Shui and Ji Tianqing were nothing to be afraid of. And Yu retreated to the side and looked at the Ancestor Fiend Celestial expressionlessly. Ever since he entered the North Underworld Mountain, he had heard many legends about the Ancestor Fiend Celestial, but he had never seen him in person. All along, Ling Xian had represented the Ancestor Fiend Celestial to negotiate with him. Now, and Yu finally saw the Ancestor Fiend Celestial's power. He could not help but feel relieved. At least the Ancestor Fiend Celestial was not weak. He was qualified to cooperate with him. At this moment, the Ancestor Fiend Celestial looked down at Luo Shui, Yuniao, and Ji Tianxing. He roared with a thunderous voice, "Luo Shui, you lowly servant, you dare to come and offend us?" Luo Shui looked at him coldly and said coldly, "Previously, this god was in seclusion and only sent a clone here. It is a pity that I could not kill you on the spot. Today is different. This god's true body has arrived and will definitely take your life." The ancestor fiend celestial opened his wide mouth and laughed contemptuously. "Ha ha ha ha. You are really confident and arrogant. It is a pity that you will not have the chance in this lifetime." When he finished speaking, his body ignited with blood fire and released an incomparably powerful aura. Formless demonic chi enveloped a radius of 10,000 miles. The divine mountain shook violently and the ground shook violently. The sky was filled with endless black chi. The demons felt his aura and cheered excitedly. As for Luo Shui, Ji Tianxing and the other two, their brows furrowed tightly as their expressions turned extremely grave. This is the aura of the deity realm? Damn it! The ancestor fiend celestial has already recovered to the deity realm? It has not even been a year. How can he recover to the martial god realm? Without a doubt, the ancestor fiend celestial had successfully recovered to the deity realm and became a true fiend celestial. At this moment, Ji Tianxing finally understood. When the ancestor fiend celestial started the war and sent millions of demons to attack the Luo Shui divine kingdom, it was all for today. Using war and killing to gather a huge amount of blood, chi, and souls, it was able to recover to the deity realm so quickly. The ancestor fiend celestial looked down at Luo Shui and Ji Tianxing and laughed sinisterly. "Ha ha ha. How is it? Are you very surprised? Are you regretting now? Too late. Today is my first battle after recovering to the deity realm. I will use you as a sacrifice." As he spoke, the ancestor fiend celestial slowly raised his two arms. Two dazzling flames lit up in his huge palms. One was blood red and the other was dark purple. After the flames dissipated, two ferocious-looking demonic sabers that were 10,000 feet long appeared. The blood-red demonic saber on the left was straight and narrow. Half of the blade was open, and the back of the blade was densely packed with saw teeth. The dark purple demonic saber on the right was curved like a crescent moon. The blade was very wide, and at first glance it looked like a huge axe. The two demonic sabers were surrounded by surging demonic flames, and emitted a mysterious and terrifying aura that seemed to be able to shake the heavens and earth. Seeing this scene, Ji Tianxing's eyes flashed with a cold light, and he muttered to himself, "This is the ancestor fiend celestial's natal treasure, the 9 disasters demonic saber? Damn it! It has already recovered to the deity realm, and can now fully display the power of the 3 calamities and 9 disasters." The ancestor fiend celestial of the ancient era had been called the Grim Reaper by the various races of the world. Wherever the Grim Reaper went, he would bring about the 3 calamities and 9 disasters, massacring the world and exterminating all living things. Now that the ancestor fiend celestial had returned to the deity realm, he would definitely bring about a shocking massacre and calamity to the Xinwu continent. At the same time, the ancestor fiend celestial laughed loudly and brazenly waved his 2 arms. Holding the 9 disasters demonic saber, he ruthlessly slashed out 2 blade lights that could split the heavens and earth. Chapter 2269. A ray of blood-red saber light and a ray of purple saber light. Both of them were tens of thousands of feet long, and they were covered in demonic flames as they slashed through the sky. Luo Shui, Ji Tianxing, and Yuniao were immediately enveloped by the boundless demonic qi and light flames. Such an earth-shattering demonic aura caused the blood of over 1,000 demonic tribe members to surge as they cheered excitedly. Even Yu could not help but be surprised as he was secretly shocked. At the moment of life and death, Yuniao did not hesitate to use the water-reverse divine sword, and sent it in front of Luo Shui. She knew that with her strength as a rank 1 martial sage, it would be useless even if she had the water-reverse divine sword. After all, she would not be able to unleash the power of the divine sword, let alone defend against the ancestor demon god. Luo Shui did not hesitate as she grabbed the water-reverse divine sword, and her body was covered in blue flames. She formed a sword seal with her left hand and waved the divine sword with her right hand. Instantly, 36 rays of icy blue light pierced towards the two saber lights in the sky. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. 36 huge icy blue swords that were tens of thousands of feet long were arranged according to the position of the Big Dipper star, and they contained boundless mysteries. Seeing this, Ji Tianqing's eyes flashed with a strange light as he thought, Big Dipper star cloud sword? I only used it once and she actually remembered it by heart and cultivated it to the Great Dipper star cloud sword. Bam 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 bam. The sword array formed by the 36 rays of sword light collided with the two saber lights, and there was a series of loud bangs that shook the 9 heavens. At that moment, the saber light and the sword array collapsed at the same time, and turned into millions of light fragments that rained down like a storm. The destructive shockwave instantly swept through a radius of 1,000 miles. The huge holy mountain was shaken by the shockwave, and there were hundreds of cracks in it as rocks and soil collapsed. At least 300 demonic tribe members were killed on the spot by the shockwave. Even the two great demon sages, Ba Tuo and Ling Xian, were pushed back dozens of miles. Blood flowed from their mouths and noses as they panted heavily. Only Yin Yu and Luo Shui, the two God Realm experts, remained in the sky and did not retreat. As for Yun Yao, she had already retreated hundreds of miles under Ji Tianqing's protection, and was not injured. The power of the battle between martial gods was terrifying. Even the aftermath of a battle could destroy everything within 1,000 miles. The ancestral Fian Celestial's attack being blocked was within his expectations, and he was not surprised at all. It stared coldly at Luo Shui as it sneered. One of the 3 great divine masters is nothing more than this. As it spoke, it once again waved the 9 difficulties devil blade, sending out 2 shocking blade lights that descended from the sky towards Luo Shui. The 3-kilometer-long saber light on the left was surging with blood-red light and raging flames. This was one of the 9 disasters, the karma of slaughter. It contained the aura of slaughter in the world, and it could only be cultivated by slaughtering millions of living beings. The saber light on the right was surging with black light and contained billions of wisps of black qi. This was one of the 9 disasters. It could kill all gods and corrode all living things. When the blood god wreaked havoc on the continent, he created a highly toxic plague based on this item. The power of the 2 saber lights was extremely ferocious. Before the saber light descended, the soaring saber intent contained within it caused everyone present to be filled with fear. It was as if they saw death approaching. Luo Shui had not experienced the ancient divine war, and had only heard of the legend of the ancestral Fiend Celestial. However, she did not know how ferocious the death god was. Now she had finally witnessed it with her own eyes. However, she was fearless. Her left hand formed a seal as she stepped onto the Big Dipper constellation. Her right hand waved the divine sword, instantly sending out 99 icy blue sword lights. The sword lights contained the profundity of the 9 palaces extreme array. They activated the power of the 9 heavens thunder, and attacked the 2 saber lights. Kaboom! Another thunderous boom reverberated in the sky like rolling thunder. The sword light and saber light shattered once again, sending out destructive shockwaves. The surviving demon race guards and experts on the mountain peak had learned their lesson this time. They had long scattered in all directions or burrowed into the divine mountain to hide. However, the divine mountain was also on the verge of collapse and half of it collapsed. After another 3 to 5 attacks, the entire divine mountain would collapse and turn into ruins. However, the ancestral Fiend Celestial turned a blind eye to this. His eyes were fixed on Luo Shui as he waved the 9 difficulties devil blade again and launched an attack. Luo Shui did not have the time to care about anything else. He used all his strength to defend himself. At the same time, Ling Xian and Ba Tuo flew to Yin Yu's side and shouted excitedly, "Lord Yin Yu, now is the best time to kill Ji Tianqing. What are you waiting for?" Indeed, Luo Shui was unable to protect Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao as he fought the ancestral Fiend Celestial with all his strength. Yin Yu turned his head and looked towards the south. He saw Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao standing side by side in the sky above the wasteland 100 miles away. They were looking at Luo Shui with concern. Seeing this, Yin Yu's lips curled into a sneer. He said softly, "All right, wait until I kill Ji Tianqing. You will have to cooperate according to the agreement." A strange look flashed across Ling Xian's eyes, but he still maintained a smile on his face. He nodded without hesitation and replied, "Lord and you don't worry. I will definitely abide by the agreement." And Yu looked at him meaningfully. Then he turned into a red light and flew across the sky towards Ji Tianqing and Yuniao. Ling Xian looked at his back as the corners of his mouth curled up into a playful sneer. Then, he and Batua followed and joined forces within Yu to surround Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing, Luo Shui can't even fend for himself now. Your time has come. Ling Xian stared at Ji Tianqing with a cold look. He revealed a smug sneer. Ji Tianqing looked at him and in Yu expressionlessly. He said in a deep voice, "Two bastards colluding with each other." And Yu frowned immediately. His entire body surged with killing intent. He shouted coldly, "Brat, you were lucky to escape back then. Today I will not repeat the same mistake. Give me your life." Just as he finished speaking, he pulled out his sword. Red light filled the sky and enveloped Ji Tianqing and Yuniao. Ling Xian and Batua did not stay idle. They joined forces to perform the secret skill of the demon path. Light shadows filled the sky as they attacked the two of them. Ji Tianqing and Yuniao quickly counterattacked. One of them slashed out a shocking sword radiance, while the other released dozens of starlight pillars. The two of them fought in the sky above the wilderness. Their figures kept teleporting and flashing in the sky. The light shadows that covered the sky kept colliding with each other, and there were loud bangs. In just 100 breaths, the two of them had exchanged more than 300 blows. Ling Xian and Batua were severely injured. Their bodies were covered with wounds and blood. However, Ji Tianqing and Yuniao's injuries were more serious. Their white robes were stained with blood. Their hair was disheveled and they looked miserable. After all, the two of them were only martial sages. They had no problem dealing with Ling Xian and Batua. However, they were no match for Yu. The two of them were in a precarious situation. If they continued to fight, they would most likely be killed by Yu. Ling Xian and Batua laughed arrogantly. They were extremely pleased with themselves. At that moment, Luo Shui, who was fighting with the ancestor demon god, suddenly teleported over. "Tianqing, Yuniao, the two of you go first. I will cover you." Chapter 2270. Ji Tianqing also knew that he would not be able to gain the upper hand if they continued fighting. Luo Shui could not defeat the ancestral fiend Celestial and Yu by herself. The only thing he could do now was to retreat from this place and make plans later. However, it was not that easy for him to retreat with Yuniao. Luo Shui had just forced Yu and Ling Xian to retreat, when the ancestral fiend Celestial unleashed 3 saber lights that could split heaven and earth. The 3 saber lights were of different colors and contained different calamities. However, their power was equally terrifying. Luo Shui could not ignore the 3 saber lights. She could only wave the reverse water divine sword and block with all her might. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Yu and Ling Xian made a comeback and caught up with Ji Tianqing and Yuniao, who were retreating. The two of them were once again surrounded by Yu, Ling Xian, and Batua. After exchanging a few blows, Yuniao was sent flying by Ling Xian's palm strike. Ji Tianqing was about to rescue her, but he was also repelled by Yu's sword. He spat out blood as he flew dozens of miles away. Yu and Ling Xian laughed sinisterly as they pounced towards Ji Tianqing with murderous intent. They wanted to kill him on the spot. Ji Tianqing gritted his teeth in anger as a raging fire burned in his chest. He had no choice but to accept reality. It was basically impossible for him to escape with Yuniao. He could only use that trump card to successfully escape. As he waved his sword and used his ultimate technique to block the trio's attacks, he secretly took out the small golden pagoda. At this moment, Luo Shui had dispelled the ancestral fiend Celestial's attack and rushed over to save Ji Tianqing and Yuniao. She shot out hundreds of saber lights with a cold expression and sent Yu flying. Ling Xian and Batua were also struck by the saber lights. Their bodies were almost instantly killed. Hideous wounds were left on their bodies as demonic blood spurted out. The two of them screamed as they flew out and crashed into the wasteland, creating a deep crater. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Ji Tianqing quickly teleported to Yuniao's identity and released his magic power into the small golden pagoda without hesitation. Swoosh! The small golden pagoda released a dazzling golden light that enveloped him and Yuniao. Before his figure disappeared, He looked deeply at Luo Shui and transmitted his voice to her. We will leave first. You must take care of yourself. Do not linger in the battle. In the next moment, the golden light enveloped him and Yunyao. Luo Shui turned her head and looked at the same time. She was relieved to herself to escape to save Yunyao to escape. Following that, she used 2 more ultimate moves to block the ancestral demon god's attack, and repelled and used counterattack. She didn't stay any longer and disappeared in a flash. In the next moment, she teleported to the end of the wasteland to the end of the wasteland to the end of the wasteland. She was to escape to Yun to escape. Yu was filled with indignation as he chased after Luo Shui for nearly 10,000 li. However, he had lost track of Luo Shui's aura and could only give up in anger. To retreat. To the back mountain divine mountain, it was still standing behind the divine mountain. After a long time, its figure retreated into the abyss of the Blood Sea. After all, it had relied on the power of the Blood Sea abyss to recover to the godly realm. It had just broken through to the godly realm a few days ago, so its demonic foundation was not stable yet. It was still in the midst of cultivation. Once it left the Blood Sea abyss, its power would be chaotic and unstable. Not only would it weaken, but there would also be the danger of its divine power going berserk. Therefore, it would not leave the Blood Sea abyss in the short term. It needed to further strengthen its demonic foundation. The ancestral fiend god returned to the abyss and went into hibernation. The world gradually calmed down. The smoke and demonic aura that covered the sky gradually disappeared. The power of 9 disasters that permeated the heavens and earth also disappeared without a trace. On the crumbling divine mountain, more than 300 demons who had survived the calamity revealed joyful expressions. On the wasteland that was riddled with holes, the demons who had fled in panic could finally stop to catch their breath. The heavily injured Ling Xian and Ba Tuo supported each other in the sky. They looked at the wreckage of the divine mountain. Their expressions were ugly, and their eyes were filled with anger. Ji Tianxing. Luo Shui. 2 damned beasts. The divine mountain has been destroyed to such an extent. How long will it take to recover? Ling Xian cursed in exasperation. His face was somewhat distorted. Ba Tuo was also filled with indignation. He said miserably, half a year ago, Luo Shui's doppelganger came to cause a ruckus and destroyed Sacred City and Baiming Palace. It took us several months to recover. Now, more than half of the divine mountain has been destroyed, and so many guards and elites have died. It will take at least a year to recover. At this time, Ling Xian saw a dark red light in the sky to the south. He hurriedly warned Ba Tuo, and Yu has returned. Later, don't say anything wrong. Although the ancestral fiend god has recovered, its power is still unstable. We were not able to kill Luo Shui and Ji Tianxing. We cannot let down our guard. We can still use Yu and the experts under his command. Ba Tuo nodded in understanding. Soon Yu flew back to the sky above the divine mountain. He came to Ling Xian and Ba Tuo's side. His face was gloomy. 2 dark red flames burned in his eyes. Clearly, his anger had not subsided. Ling Xian knew the answer, but he deliberately asked, Lord Yu, did you catch up to Luo Shui? Yu's face was dark. He did not speak. Ling Xian nodded and said to himself, it seems that she escaped, but this is normal. After all, she is one of the 3 divine lords. Lord, please be patient. Let's deal with the aftermath first, then discuss how to deal with them. Yu looked at him expressionlessly. He said in a low voice, Ling Xian, dealing with martial god Luo Shui is your demon race's matter. My goal is only Ji Tianxing and the 72 cities. I have done what I should do. Mobilize 500,000 warriors as soon as possible. I want to take the 72 cities as soon as possible. Our plan cannot be delayed any longer. Otherwise, before he could finish, Ling Xian shook his head with a bitter smile. Lord Yu, if you succeed in killing Ji Tianxing, I will fulfill my promise. However, Ji Tianxing has not been eliminated. He is still a great threat to us. He then pointed at the devastated divine mountain and said helplessly, and as you can see, the divine mountain of my race has been destroyed by this disaster and has been reduced to ruins. My top priority is to rebuild the Divine Palace and repair the Divine Mountain. Oh right, Lord has many strong warriors under your command. Shouldn't you borrow some to help me rebuild my home? I don't need too many. Just 20 people will be enough. Seeing Ling Xian's reaction, and you frowned and scolded angrily, "Bastard, go to hell." After scolding, he flung his sleeve angrily and flew away. When he reached the sky above the divine city, he summoned a warship and rushed to the south. Ling Xian looked at the end of the wasteland. His mouth curved into a mocking sneer as he muttered to himself, want to take advantage of my clan. Chapter 2271. South of Dark North Mountain. Jingshan Region 100 Origin City. Inside the dignified city lord's manor, there was a gloomy atmosphere. The guards and maids were very careful, not daring to make any noise when they walked, and even speaking in hushed tones. This was because everyone knew that when Lord Enyu returned in the evening, his face was very gloomy, and his entire body was wrapped in anger. At this time no one dared to provoke him. Within Enyu's study, he was sitting in front of his desk, fiddling with a dark silver diamond-shaped crystal in his hand as he expressionlessly looked out the window. It was obvious that he was thinking about something extremely important. The guard captain, who was wearing black armor and missing 2 legs, stood respectfully beside the desk. Both of them were silent. After a long time, the guard captain could not help but speak to Enyu. "Captain, we can't continue like this. The demons clearly don't trust us, and they're even plotting against us. We need to increase our military strength and report this news to the general. Otherwise, we won't even be able to defend the 5 southern regions, let alone occupy the 72 cities." Enyu remained silent, still weighing the pros and cons. The guard captain continued to persuade him. "As you know, the general's flagship is currently leading a team of guards to this star field. As long as you send out a message, the general will definitely bring the guards over. At that time, not only will we be able to seize Dark North Mountain, but the entire Shinwu continent will be ours." Enyu finally reacted and turned to glare at the guard captain. He sneered and asked, "Are you sure that Shinwu continent will still be ours after the general arrives? If the general knows that we've discovered a vast and rich world, will he only bring a team of guards? There are also other warships, at least 30 captains and close to 10,000 soldiers. All of them will flock over." At this point, Enyu angrily hammered the table and sneered. At that time the general will certainly be able to rule the entire continent and become the master of this world. However, the territories and resources of the 3 divine kingdoms will be cleanly divided by those 30 bastards. I've lost more than half of my men, so how can I compete with them? If things go wrong, the general might even take my men apart and assign them to other warships. As for me, I can only be the assistant of the other captains." The guard captain was shocked, and he finally understood Enyu's worries and concerns. He hurriedly shook his head and consoled, "Your Excellency, you're overthinking. You are the first to discover this world. The general will definitely reward you handsomely. At that time, not only will we not split up your guards, we will even reward you greatly and allocate more guards to you." Enyu did not speak. After a moment of consideration, he nodded slightly and said, "This is possible. But I can't believe it. I have to be prepared." The guard captain asked in confusion, "Sir, what do you mean?" Enyu said in a low voice, "Of course, the news has to be reported to the general. When he receives the news and arrives in this world, it will take about a year. Moreover, this world was sealed by the power of the gods. Even with the general's strength, he could not force his way in. He could only find an opening to enter. I still have a year, so I can make some preparations in advance. At that time, when the general descends into this world, I will become his most trusted and most valued confidant." The guard captain's blood boiled as he listened. His heart was filled with anticipation. He nodded repeatedly and said, "That's right. We must not lose to the other battleships. We must be the heroes of the 3rd Fleet." Enyu did not hesitate any longer. He channeled a ball of blood-red light into the dark silver diamond-shaped crystal. Then he held the diamond-shaped crystal in his hand and entered the dark secret chamber. Through a mysterious array, He sent the diamond-shaped crystal out. Swoosh! A dot of starlight flew into the sky and disappeared in the blink of an eye. North of the ruins of God. In the Jiutian Ten Absolutes Tower in the Yinyang Secret Realm. Ji Tianqing and Yunyao opened their eyes one after another and looked at their surroundings. They saw an ancient altar that was hundreds of meters tall beneath their feet. On the cold black stone floor, there was a mysterious array diagram carved on it. There were 18 demon god statues around it. All of them looked ferocious, and they exuded an ancient and powerful aura. Around the altar was a spacious and bright palace. It was at least 1,000 feet in radius. On the walls of the palace there were gemstone lamps. There was a huge star map on the dome. It emitted dazzling starlight and illuminated the entire palace. Yunyao could also sense that every light spot in the vast star map seemed to be a real star. She raised her hand to tidy up her messy hair and asked subconsciously, "Tianqing, where are we?" Ji Tianqing sat beside her and looked at her with concern. He used his divine sense to check her injuries. When he heard Yunyao's question, he replied without raising his head, "We are in a divine pagoda. The divine pagoda is in the mystic realm in the north of the ruins of God. This place is absolutely safe. Even the martial gods can't find it." Yunyao was startled and asked subconsciously, "Really? You didn't leave it behind, did you?" Ji Tianqing waved his hand and chuckled. "Of course not. This is a divine pagoda left behind by the demon god king. I haven't figured it out yet." Yunyao immediately became interested and asked, "If you haven't figured it out, how can you teleport directly from the North Underworld mountain to the ruins of God? How did you get this divine pagoda?" Seeing that Ji Tianqing was engrossed in it, she shook her head gently and said, "Don't worry. I'm only slightly injured. It's nothing serious." Ji Tianqing checked her and found that her injuries were indeed not serious. However, he was still a little worried and asked, "What about the children? Did you hurt them?" "Don't worry. The children are not so delicate." Yunyao smiled and comforted him gently. Ji Tianqing was relieved and told her the process of getting the Jiutian Ten Absolutes Pagoda. Yunyao was engrossed in it and her mood fluctuated. In the end, after listening to Ji Tianqing's narration of the entire process, she finally revealed an expression of relief. She sighed in disbelief. "I really didn't expect that such a powerful and heaven-defying artifact would be hidden on this seemingly ordinary continent." Ji Tianqing nodded in agreement and said, "Yes, I left in a hurry back then and didn't see this world clearly. I missed a lot of things. Now that I have a new understanding of this world, I realize that the five elements world is not simple. At least, it's different from the ordinary inferior worlds." Yunyao suddenly thought of something and immediately revealed a worried expression. She asked, "Oh right, where's Jiku? Did you save her?" Ji Tianqing nodded and said, "Don't worry. When you and Luo Shui were killing, I had already destroyed the torture department and saved Cuckoo. Her injuries are too serious and she's recuperating in the sword world. Let me circulate my energy and recuperate for a few days before casting a spell to save her." Yunyao nodded slightly and said, "That's good too. If you need my help, call me." Chapter 2272. Seeing that Yunyao was about to send a message to Luo Shui, Ji Tianqing waved his hand. The divine pagoda can isolate all powers and even the heavenly Tao. Communication jade slips are even more useless. As he spoke, he activated the Daoyuo divine array and left the divine pagoda with Yunyao. In the next instant, the two of them appeared outside the Yinyang mystic realm on the barren mountain that was thousands of feet tall. Yunyao was shocked and could not believe that the Nine Heavens Ten Absolutes Pagoda had such terrifying power. Ji Tianqing did not explain further and only said one sentence. "Back then, I stayed in the Divine Pagoda for a long time and delayed my tribulation. After I left the Divine Pagoda, I underwent 2 consecutive tribulations in a day." Yunyao was even more shocked and completely believed it at the same time. After calming herself down, she took out a communication jade slip and sent a message to Luo Shui. After waiting for about half an hour, she received a jade slip from Luo Shui. After reading the information in the jade slip, she was obviously relieved and said to Ji Tianqing, "Fortunately, after we escaped, the Divine Master also left. I already expected that with her strength, Even if the ancestral fiend celestial and Yu worked together, they would not be able to stop her. Ji Tianqing nodded and did not say much. However, he was still worried and thought to himself, now that the ancestral fiend celestial has just broken through to the divine realm, the fiend celestial's foundation is not stable yet. Naturally, he would not risk his life to stop Luo Shui. In another 3 to 5 years, when the ancestral fiend celestial's foundation is stable and his strength is even stronger, Luo Shui might not be his match. After a while, he collected his thoughts and took out a communication jade slip to send a message to the Huanglong Taoist. He said in the jade slip that he had successfully rescued Jiku and was not in danger. However, he still had matters to attend to and might not be able to return to the Pillar of Heaven's mountains for a few months. He asked the Huanglong Taoist to guard the sect well. After sending the message, Ji Tianqing brought Yunyao back to the 5th level of the Divine Pagoda. Yunyao took out an elixir and consumed it, preparing to circulate her energy to heal her injuries. However, Ji Tianqing struck out a dazzling light with his palm and moved the 18 demon god statues. Swish, swish, swish. The 18 Fey god statues spun rapidly and soon changed their order. Then a mysterious white light shone from the statue, and a door of light appeared on the altar. Yunyao didn't understand what he meant and asked in confusion, Tianqing, what are you doing? Where does this portal lead to? Ji Tianqing pointed to the top of his head and revealed a playful smile. Of course, I'll take you to an interesting place. You'll definitely like it. Interesting place? Yunyao blinked her eyes, revealing an expectant look. Ji Tianqing didn't say much and pulled her into the light door. Shua! In the next instant, the two of them left the 5th level and entered the 6th level of the Divine Pagoda. The surroundings were pitch black like the Outerium, and it was cold and silent. Yunyao looked around and asked doubtfully, Tianqing, is this the interesting place you mentioned just now? It was pitch black, cold and silent just like the void outside. However, it doesn't seem right. The spiritual chi of heaven and earth is flowing here. Doesn't seem like the void. At the same time, Yaya's voice rang in Yunyao and Ji Tianqing's minds. Humph! Father lied to us. It's so dark here. How is it interesting? The childish voice was crisp and cute, but there was a hint of anger in it. Ji Tianqing and Yunyao couldn't help but laugh. Ji Tianqing chuckled and said, all right, I won't keep you in suspense. This is the 6th level of the Divine Pagoda. The spacetime here is chaotic, and the flow of time is 50 times faster than the outside world. We have been cultivating here for 50 years, and only 1 year has passed in the 5 elements realm. I see. Only then did Yunyao come to a sudden realization. Her eyes were filled with extraordinary splendor. She said with a heart full of anticipation, it really is a magical place. I just refined the Wind-Fire Sacred Pearl and broke through to the Martial Sage realm not long ago. I haven't really absorbed the power of the Sacred Pearl. Since that's the case, I will cultivate in seclusion here and refine the power of the Sacred Pearl as soon as possible. Ji Tianqing smiled and nodded. All right, don't worry and cultivate. Yunyao reminded him a few more times before finding a place in the dark to sit down and heal her injuries. Ji Tianqing didn't waste any more time. He took out an elixir and consumed it, quickly healing his injuries. 5 days passed quickly. His injuries were stabilized and there weren't any major problems. His magic power was also fully recovered. He took out the Sword of Burial of Heaven and entered the Sword World to check on Jiku's situation. When he saw Jiku, it was at the peak of a mountain outside peaceful Earth City. She was still unconscious, lying quietly on a millstone on the mountain peak. The Golden Mountain King and the Xitigarbha Divine Armor were guarding near the mountain peak, watching her with concern. In the valley there was a towering ancient tree that was tens of thousands of feet tall. It stretched out hundreds of millions of branches. It was Patriarch Sanju's Dharma body. It used to be the green light treasure tree. When Ji Tianqing arrived at the mountain peak, it was continuously releasing greenwood true qi that enveloped Jiku. The greenwood true qi contained a powerful life force. It constantly purified Jiku's demonic qi and replenished her life force. However, Jiku's injuries were very serious, especially her soul. Patriarch Sanju's greenwood true qi could only heal Aka's physical injuries. It couldn't expel the demonic qi or heal the injuries to her soul. Seeing Ji Tianqing arrive, Patriarch Sanju hurriedly stopped casting and shouted respectfully, "Greetings, Master." Ji Tianqing nodded and waved at him. "Sanju, you can go back and rest." After Patriarch Sanju bowed respectfully, he retreated into the depths of the mountain and fell asleep. Ji Tianqing dismissed the Jinshan King and the Ksitigarbha divine armor. He stood alone on the mountain peak and looked at Jiku, who was sleeping. Jika's cheeks were covered by her messy long hair. Her exposed neck and arms were still dark purple. Her appearance was still demonized. The aura of her soul was very weak. Under the protection of the heavenly star chain, it was slowly fluctuating. Ji Tianqing sat beside her and slowly reached out to push her long hair aside. He held her blood-stained face and looked at her deeply. "Cuckoo, cuckoo. Why are you so silly? If it weren't for the heavenly star chain protecting you, if I hadn't arrived in time, you would have been dead." He looked at Jiku affectionately and muttered to himself, "I know that you're not afraid of death, and you don't regret dying for me. But do you know that I've already seen you die with my own eyes? How can I make the same mistake and let the same tragedy happen again? From now on, I won't allow you to do such a stupid thing again. I'll protect you forever. I don't need your protection or sacrifice anymore." After saying that, he slowly raised his palms and activated the power of the heaven-mending orb. It released 2 streaks of dense white light that covered Jika's body. Immediately, the white light spread out and silently entered Jika's body. All demonic qi and demonic qi would quickly dissipate when they came into contact with the white light. Jika's body was being demonized at a visible speed and returned to its original appearance. Chapter 2273. After about 100 breaths of time, Ji Tianqing finally retracted his palms and stopped casting the spell. Jiku had completely shed her demonized state and returned to her original appearance. Ji Tianqing rummaged through his interspatial ring for a while and found a dark red heavenly fireglass dress. This dress was very exquisite and luxurious. It was also a saint-level Dharma treasure with powerful defense and many other uses. Ji Tianqing waved his hand and shot out a ray of fire, which wrapped around the heavenly fireglass dress and covered Jika's body. Swoosh! With a flash of light, the fiery red dress was like a living thing. It was properly worn on Jika's body. Jiku, who had changed her clothes, showed her original appearance and elegance even though she was still unconscious. She was youthful, energetic, charming, and had a noble and playful temperament. Ji Tianqing stared at her and muttered to himself, "Her physical injuries are very serious, but they are nothing to worry about. She will recover in 3 months. However, I don't know how long it will take for her soul to recover." After thinking for a moment, he took out 2 pills to heal soul injuries from his interspatial ring and gave them to Jiku. Then, he sat cross-legged in front of Jiku and formed a seal with both hands. He released a vast amount of magic power to help her refine the pills. Half a day later, the 2 pills were refined by Jiku. He then used the power of the pills to heal Jiku's soul injuries. Unknowingly, another half a month passed. Jiku absorbed more than half of the 2 saint-level pills' medicinal effects. Her soul injuries were much more stable. Therefore, Ji Tianqing used the power of the heaven-mending pearl to heal Jiku's injuries. The heaven-mending pearl had always been in his sea of consciousness, nurturing his soul. Moreover, the heaven-mending pearl recovered its power very slowly. If it was used up all at once, it would take at least 3 to 5 years to recover. However, Ji Tianqing couldn't care less in order to save Jiku. He didn't hesitate to use the power of the heaven-mending pearl to heal Jiku as soon as possible. Time flew by. Half a year passed in the blink of an eye. For a total of 180 days, Ji Tianqing had been sitting on top of the millstone, circulating his energy day and night. He had been treating Jiku's injuries without stopping for a moment. Even if he was mentally exhausted, he didn't care at all. White light continued to surge out of his palms, wrapping around the Jiku as it floated in front of him like a huge cocoon. At this moment, the white light became dimmer and thinner. Ji Tianqing held on for another 2 hours before the white light finally dried up completely. Clearly, the power of the heaven-mending pearl had been completely exhausted. Only then did he stop casting and finally stop. Phew, Ji Tianqing heaved a sigh of relief as if a heavy burden had been lifted from his shoulders. He lay on the big rock with his eyes closed, panting heavily. A strong sense of weariness assaulted his mind, causing him to be unable to help but fall asleep. At this moment, the white ball of light floating in the air gradually shrunk. All of the white light entered Jiku's body and quickly disappeared. Then Jiku, who was wearing a fiery red dress, appeared and gradually landed on the big millstone. She slowly opened her eyes, uttered a vague sound from her mouth and slowly sat up. She looked around with a blank expression. Seeing that she was surrounded by green mountains and clear waters, and the blue sky above her head, she was suddenly stunned. She had never seen such a tranquil and peaceful scenery in the past few years in the North Underworld mountain. At that moment she even thought that she was seeing things. She couldn't help but whisper, "Where is this place? Am I dead?" While saying that, she couldn't help but raise her hand and rub her eyes. But when she saw her palms and arms, she was immediately stunned again. Her fair and tender palms were no longer an ugly dark purple color. Her nails were also sparkling and translucent like jade, no longer demonic black. On her slender and white arms, she was wearing an exquisite and gorgeous fiery red dress, decorated with cloud patterns and gemstones. This dress used to be her favorite color and style, but after entering the North Underworld mountain, she could never wear it again. And now she had finally returned to her original appearance, wearing her favorite fiery red dress. She only felt disbelief, as if she was immersed in a beautiful dream and illusion. Suddenly a warm current flowed through her heart, and her body trembled. She couldn't help but want to cry. At that moment a pair of warm and strong arms slowly stretched out from behind her, tightly hugging her waist. Her body trembled and she quickly turned her head. What she saw was a face that was inches away from her. He was handsome and valiant, with sharp eyebrows and starry eyes. His deep eyes had the most enchanting light. This was such a familiar face. He had appeared thousands of times in her memory, and she couldn't bear to part with him even after 3 lifetimes. Jiku was stunned on the spot. Her eyes widened as she looked at him in disbelief. For a moment, she forgot to breathe and speak. She simply couldn't believe that when she woke up from her daze, the first thing she saw was the person she couldn't let go of the most, and also the person she wanted to see the most. The two of them looked at each other, their eyes containing too many complicated emotions. Neither of them spoke. Everything was so quiet. After a full 10 breaths, Jika finally regained her senses. Her nearly blank mind was filled with a strong sense of surprise. "Big brother Tianqing!" She cried out in a sobbing voice. The tears that had accumulated in her clear eyes could no longer be controlled. 2 crystal-clear teardrops immediately flowed out and slid down her cheeks. Ji Tianqing didn't say anything. He only blinked at her and revealed a gentle smile. Jiku was stunned for a moment. She instinctively wanted to ask him what was going on. However, just as she opened her cherry lips, she was enveloped by a warm mouth. She immediately swallowed the words that were about to come out of her mouth. Her eyes suddenly widened, and there was a strong sense of surprise in them. Her heart was also filled with disbelief. Her body stiffened on the spot. Her mind, which had just recovered its ability to think, suddenly went blank again. Jiku was completely stunned. The sudden surprise and happiness made her completely unable to believe it. She didn't know how to react. There was only one thought in her mind. This can't be real. This must be a dream. Yes, I must be dreaming. But this dream is so real. I don't want to wake up. After an unknown period of time, perhaps it was a quarter of an hour, or perhaps it was an hour. His warm and domineering mouth moved away, and his handsome and charming face also retreated, revealing an expression that was like a smile yet not a smile. However, Jiku was still stunned on the spot. Her eyes were closed and she didn't move at all, like a stone statue. A certain someone finally couldn't hold it in anymore. He pretended to cough twice and said in a strange tone, "I think I might have awakened some kind of supernatural power." Hearing the familiar voice, Jika finally regained her senses. She opened her eyes and asked him in confusion, "What supernatural power?" "A supernatural power that can turn people into stone." Ji Tianqing said with a serious face. I tried it just now, and it really turned her into stone. Also, it made her mind go blank and she lost the ability to think. Chapter 2274. How could Ji Ku not know that Ji Tianqing was deliberately teasing her? She lowered her head in embarrassment and couldn't help but spit at him. Big brother Tianqing, you're getting more and more improper. Ji Tianqing chuckled and slowly lay down on the millstone. He put his arms behind his head and looked up at the blue sky with a satisfied smile on his face. It's so good to be alive. He raised his eyebrows and said with emotion. Ji Ku immediately understood what he meant and couldn't help but pout. She lay down beside Ji Tianqing and propped her face with her hands. She looked at him with an aggrieved expression and whispered, Big brother Tianqing, I'm sorry. It's my fault. If I hadn't been so stubborn, my identity wouldn't have been exposed and you wouldn't have been in danger. Before she could finish speaking, Ji Tianqing reached out a finger and pressed it against her lips. Kuku, I know you're trying to help me. Of course, I won't blame you for what happened. Even if I have to go to heaven or go to hell, I'll definitely save you. But I hope that you won't be so stupid to bear all the hardships and dangers by yourself. Yao Yao and I don't want to see you treat yourself like this anymore. We all hope that you can live well and be happy and carefree. Ji Ku's expression changed a little. She lowered her head guiltily and asked in a low voice, Eldest senior sister also knows about this? Ji Tianqing nodded and said with a smile, Not only did she know, but she also rushed to the Pillar of Heaven's mountains and insisted on going to Baiming Palace with me to save you. I was worried about her safety, so I trapped her in the secret chamber. But I didn't expect that she actually broke the array I set up and escaped from the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. Later, she asked the Luoshui martial god for help and went to Baiming Palace to fight, so I took the opportunity to save you. Ji Ku was surprised and asked in disbelief, Big brother Tianqing, is that true? When first senior sister found out that you risked your life to save me, not only was she not angry, she didn't try to stop you. Instead, she came to save me personally. Ji Tianqing nodded again and said in a serious tone, Yao Yao is not the kind of person you think she is. She is also not an ordinary woman. How can you judge her with common sense? She wasn't angry and she didn't try to stop you. She only felt worried and guilty about you. Guilty? Ji Ku frowned in confusion. She's already married to you. She's your legal wife. But I still can't let go of the knot in my heart, and have always wanted to follow you. Why would she feel guilty? Ji Tianqing said with some emotion. Maybe she will say those words to you personally in the future. Let's not talk about this today. Ji Ku nodded with a complicated expression. His heart was filled with a myriad of emotions and thoughts. At this time, Ji Tianqing held her wrist and said seriously, Don't move. Let me take a look at your injuries first and see how they're recovering. Ji Ku smiled and said, Big brother Tianqing, don't worry. My injuries have basically recovered. I know that you've been helping me heal my soul injuries. You've been casting for so long. You must be very tired. Quickly go back and rest. Ji Tianqing checked the condition of her soul. Seeing that her injuries were indeed healed, he revealed a gratified smile. Although the heaven-mending pearl's power has been exhausted, it was worth it to be able to heal your soul injuries. Then he brought Ji Ku out of the sword world and returned to the 6th level of the divine pagoda. In the pitch-black space it was cold and silent. There were only a few colorful ribbons of light at the far end of the darkness. Ji Ku looked around in confusion. He didn't know where he was. Ji Tianqing explained to him, After we escaped from Baiming Palace, we hid here. This is the internal space of a divine pagoda. We're on the 6th level. The space-time here is chaotic. With that, he pointed to the dark space dozens of miles away and said, Yao Yao is in seclusion there to heal and cultivate. If there's nothing else, don't disturb her. When she's done with her cultivation, you can go greet her and thank her. Ji Ku looked into the depths of the darkness and vaguely saw a moon-white figure sitting quietly in the darkness. She nodded with a smile and said with a complicated tone, I've never dared to hope that eldest senior sister would treat me like this. I really should thank her. Ji Tianqing patted her shoulder and said with a smile, All right, don't think too much. Cultivate here first. I'm also going into seclusion for a period of time to recover my strength as soon as possible. Then he and Jiku separated. They each found a place to sit down and cultivate. After entering the state of cultivation, Ji Tianqing's exhausted body and mind began to recover slowly. He used half a month to recover his magic power and soul to their peak state. However, the power of the heaven mending pearl was still very weak. It would take another 4 to 5 years for it to recover. Ji Tianqing was not in a hurry. He continued to cultivate the sword soul Dao and comprehend the sword arts in the Stellar Sword Manual. The ancestor Fiend Celestial had recovered to the divine realm. It brought him great pressure and a sense of danger. He only wanted to break through to the divine realm as soon as possible. Only then would he be qualified to fight against the ancestor Fiend Celestial, because he knew that the ancestor Fiend Celestial and Yu would not let him go. Next time he didn't know what kind of tricks the other party would use. He had to increase his strength as much as possible. At the same time, in the corner of the dark space, Jiku opened her eyes. In fact, she had not cultivated for the past half a month. She had been resting with her eyes closed. Her mood was very complicated. She had been recalling. She recalled what Ji Tianqing had said before. She recalled what had happened in the Tianxian continent. She also recalled the time when she and Ji Tianqing were childhood sweethearts in the Clear Sky Kingdom. But now she ended her memories and flew into the depths of the darkness. That was because she had been using her divine consciousness to observe Yunyao's movements. Yunyao had just finished recuperating and had already woken up. Swoosh! Jiku crossed the darkness and landed in front of Yunyao. Yunyao sensed her aura approaching and immediately opened her eyes. Seeing that it was Jiku who was in a good state of mind and did not look like she had yet to recover from her injuries, she immediately revealed a gratified smile. Aku, you're finally awake. How are your injuries? Jiku stared at Yunyao. Seeing that she was as beautiful as a fairy, her eyes were sincere, and her smile was warm, she could not help but feel guilty. She bowed slightly to Yunyao and said, "Greetings, senior sister." Yunyao quickly reached out to support her. She shook her head gently and said, "Aku, there's no need to be so polite between us." Jiku held her hands with a complicated expression. After hesitating for a moment, she said sincerely, "Senior sister, thank you for your help. If not for your help, I would have died in Baiming Palace." Yunyao saw that she wanted to say something but stopped. She immediately understood and said with a warm smile, "Aku, if it's just to thank me, there's no need to mention it." Chapter 2275. Jika didn't try to hide it. She nodded and said, "Eldest senior sister, you're Tianqing's wife, the person I envy the most. You know how I feel about him and you know how dangerous Baiming Palace is. Why did you agree to let him save me? If you dissuade him or don't help him, I will die in Baiming Palace. That way no one will blame you. And in his heart there will no longer be me. He will only love you wholeheartedly." Yunyao shook her head and said with a solemn expression, "Aku, these are the thoughts of ordinary people. They're selfish and stupid. You and I are the most important people to Tianqing. It's my duty to save you. You should know very well that no matter which of us is in danger, Tianqing will risk his life to save us. We have to live well. If either of us unfortunately dies, it will make Tianqing suffer for the rest of his life. He won't forget it. It will only be engraved in his heart and engraved in his soul. Just like your feelings for him. Even after reincarnation, they still haven't changed." At this point, Yunyao held Jika's hand tightly and said emotionally, "Actually, I already regretted it the moment I found out about your identity. In your previous life, you chased after him your whole life. You crossed the 3 realms and didn't manage to fulfill your wish until you died. In this life, you were his childhood sweetheart. You were devoted to him and didn't fear death. If I didn't appear, you would have gotten married to him and fulfilled your long-cherished wish from your previous life. But it was too late for me to regret it. At that time I was already married to Tianqing, and I loved him deeply. I couldn't and wouldn't leave him. But the deeper his love for me, the more guilty I felt. Because I know that your love for him is no less than mine. I can sacrifice myself for Tianqing. You can do it too. You've even died for him once. Only then can I understand how torturous the pain of not being able to love someone deeply is. When she heard this, Jika's eyes were filled with a layer of mist. Her heart was both sad and moved. She pursed her lips tightly, trying not to cry. But for some unknown reason, the tears in her eyes could not be controlled and silently slipped out of her eyes. She shook her head and said in a choked voice, "Eldest senior sister, I'm sorry. I don't want to hurt you. I'm not trying to snatch brother Tianqing away from you." Yunyao smiled faintly. She reached out to wipe away the tears on her face and comforted her. "Aku, you've never wronged anyone. You don't have to apologize to anyone. I owe you. I'm the one who should apologize. I was the one who snatched the position that originally belonged to you and made you suffer. But you didn't blame me, nor did you hate me. You're still as infatuated as ever. You're willing to sacrifice your life for Tianqing. You're so magnanimous and forgiving. This is what true love means. It goes deep into your bones." Jika had never thought that there would be a day when someone would understand her so well and say such words. Moreover, these words came from Yunyao's mouth. All sorts of feelings welled up in her heart, and she couldn't help but cry out loud. Yunyao opened her arms and hugged her. She patted her back gently and said in a solemn tone, "Aku, don't leave me again. We'll be together forever. You don't have to suppress yourself anymore. You don't have to pretend. You've already suffered so much pain and torture for Tianqing. In the future, he'll make it up to you twice as much. You'll have to repay him for the rest of your life." Jika's body stiffened and her eyes widened in disbelief. When she came back to her senses, she quickly broke free from Yunyao's embrace and shook her head. "No, eldest senior sister, this isn't right. It's not fair to you." Yunyao pressed her shoulders with both hands and said sincerely, "Aku, this is the only way to be fair to you and me. Tianqing won't let anyone down. This is also the only way that you, Tianqing, and I won't be in pain and regret. Unless you don't want to be with Tianqing?" Jika quickly shook her head and couldn't help but say, No. I'm willing. Of course I'm willing." Yunyao smiled and nodded. "That's right. All right, you don't have to say anything else. It's settled." But Jiku was still in disbelief and wanted to ask a few more questions. However, Yunyao waved her hand and turned to leave with a smile. Jiku stood in the darkness in a daze, watching her figure disappear into the distance. She couldn't help but have mixed feelings in her heart. But more than that, he felt relieved and touched. Time passed quickly in the dark space. 3 months, half a year, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years passed unknowingly. Ji Tianqing had been cultivating in seclusion for 3 whole years. He had mastered many of the secret arts and added many changes to the secret arts of Sword Dao. At the same time, his strength increased by 5 times, and he reached the 5th level martial sage realm. After stabilizing his martial Dao foundation, he temporarily stopped cultivating. This was because someone used their spiritual consciousness to wake him up. He opened his eyes and saw that the person standing beside him was Yunyao. Yunyao had also cultivated in seclusion for 3 years, and seemed to have refined the power of the wind-fire sacred pearl. Her strength had also increased by leaps and bounds, and she had reached the 4th level martial sage realm. In just 3 years she had advanced by 3 levels. This was an unprecedented talent. Ji Tianqing was shocked and was about to ask Yunyao. However, Yunyao spoke first and said worriedly, "Tianqing, something happened." Ji Tianqing immediately frowned and asked, "What's wrong, Yao Yao? What happened?" Yunyao said worriedly, "Aku is missing." "What?" Ji Tianqing's heart tightened and he turned around to search. After searching the entire dark space, he did not see Jiku. He could not help but frown and asked hurriedly, "Yao Yao, what happened? How did Kuka disappear into thin air? Could it be that she has some grudges and left secretly? But that's not right. Only I can control this sacred pagoda and enter it as I wish." Yunyao was also confused and said seriously, "About 3 years ago I met her and we had a lot to talk about. At that time I confessed to her." "Confessed to what?" Ji Tianqing asked subconsciously. "Why are you asking the obvious?" Yunyao rolled her eyes at him. "Of course I persuaded her to stay and be with us." Ji Tianqing immediately revealed an awkward expression and muttered in a low voice, Yao, you wouldn't have suggested to make her my concubine. So she left in a fit of anger, right? Yun Yao frowned and said in a low voice, what wife and concubine? I don't have such thoughts and I won't treat her differently. Ji Tianqing trusted her and knew that she would not say such things. That's strange. What was Cuckoo thinking? Why did she leave without saying goodbye? He frowned and thought for a while but could not think of a reason. Chapter 2276. Jiku was not in the dark space of the 6th level. Thus, Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao quickly left and returned to the 5th level. Swoosh! With a flash of light, the two of them appeared in the spacious and bright hall and stood on the altar. As soon as the two of them steadied themselves, Yun Yao let out a low cry. Aku, why are you here? Ji Tianqing turned to look at her and saw a girl in a fiery red dress sitting on the ground beside her. The beautiful girl in the red dress was Jiku. She was sitting cross-legged in the origin divine formation with her hands on her knees. Her eyes were closed as she cultivated. Even when Yun Yao shouted, she didn't react. She didn't move at all. There was a silver pearl necklace around her fair neck that was shining with dazzling starlight. The origin divine formation beneath her also began to glow with gold and silver light, and was in the process of activating. The 18 demon god statues around the altar were all shining with gold, silver, red, black and blue lights. The colorful lights gathered around Jiku, forming a hazy light shield that protected her firmly. Seeing this, Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao quickly retreated and stood at the edge of the altar. After all, the origin divine formation had been activated, and the demon god statues had also changed. The two of them didn't dare to stay in the formation lest they affect Jiku. Yun Yao observed for a moment and couldn't help but frown. She asked in confusion, Tianqing, what is Aku doing? Why did she leave the 6th level alone and come back here? Also, this formation and those demon god statues seem to have some kind of connection with her? Ji Tianqing frowned and looked at Jiku. After observing for a long time, he shook his head. I'm afraid only she knows what's going on. But I can roughly guess that it might have something to do with her identity and that heavenly star chain. Identity? Heavenly star chain? Yun Yao was stunned for a moment and vaguely understood something. You mean she was the bright moon demon emperor in her previous life, so she was originally a demon? Also, that heavenly star chain is a divine artifact, and it's very likely to be the key to these changes? Ji Tianqing nodded slightly and said calmly, that's right. In her previous life, she possessed the bloodline of the demon clan, and eventually became a divine lord with remarkable abilities. Although her current strength was still very weak. However, she has already recovered some of her memories, and it is very likely that she has resonated and connected with the supernatural entity statue. Yun Yao nodded with a smile and said expectantly, if that's the case, she has encountered an opportunity and is likely to reap great benefits because of it. Ji Tianqing also revealed a look of anticipation. He nodded and said, there will definitely be opportunities and gains. Let's not disturb her and just wait and see. After that, the two of them quieted down and didn't say anything more. The two stood at the edge of the altar and waited patiently for 2 days. However, Jiku was still in a deep sleep and showed no signs of waking up. Seeing this, Ji Tianqing could only bring Yun Yao and leave the 5th level temporarily. Forget it, we don't know how long it will take for her to wake up. We can't just wait like this. Let's go back to the 6th level and cultivate in seclusion. After we finish cultivating, she will wake up. Then the two of them returned to the 6th level. They each found a place with abundant and stable energy and sat in the darkness to cultivate in seclusion. The flow of time in the 6th level was different from that in the 5th level. It was almost 50 times faster. Only about a month had passed in the 5th level. Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao cultivated in seclusion in the 6th level for another 4 years. During this period of seclusion, Ji Tianqing's strength increased again, and he reached the rank 6 martial sage realm. Yun Yao completely refined the power of the weathering divine pearl, and broke through 2 realms consecutively. She had also reached the rank 6 martial sage realm. However, the potential and power of the divine pearl had been exhausted. If she continued to cultivate in seclusion, there wouldn't be much meaning as her strength would increase at a much slower rate. Ji Tianqing was facing a similar problem. If he cultivated in seclusion for a long period of time, his strength wouldn't increase continuously. He had to settle down for a period of time and consolidate his martial arts foundation. Then, the two of them ended their seclusion and left the 6th level together. Swoosh! With a flash of white light, the two of them returned to the 5th level of the Divine Pagoda and landed on the altar. They saw that the Great Luo Divine Array on the ground had lost its radiance and it had obviously stopped operating. The 18 demon god statues around them also became dim and returned to their normal state. Only Jiku was still sitting in the middle of the altar. His hands were forming seals as he maintained his cultivation posture. A ball of multicolored light wrapped around her like a cocoon. However, the 5-colored radiance was obviously much weaker, and it was gradually dissipating. Seeing this, Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao looked at each other. The two of them knew that Jiku was likely to wake up. As expected, half a day later, the 5-colored radiance that wrapped around her completely disappeared. She gradually opened her eyes, and the mysterious aura that filled her body also gradually disappeared. When she saw clearly what was in front of her, she saw Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao looking at her expectantly. Big brother Tianqing? Eldest senior sister? Why are you here? Jiku hurriedly stood up and greeted them apologetically. The two of them nodded slightly and looked at her with bright eyes, carefully sizing her up. Ji Tianqing asked, Cuckoo, weren't you on the 6th level? Why are you here? Also, you've been sleeping on the altar for more than a month. What happened? At the mention of this, Jiku's expression became even more apologetic. Big brother Tianqing, eldest senior sister, it's like this. When we were on the 6th level, both of you were cultivating in seclusion. I also know that the flow of time there is different, and it's most suitable for seclusion. However, after meditating for a few days, I still couldn't enter the state of cultivation. There seemed to be some kind of voice calling out to me, invading my soul and making me unable to calm down. The heavenly star chain was also shining with starlight, and there was a powerful divine power surging around it. It seemed very strange. I simply stopped cultivating in seclusion. I wore the heavenly star chain, closed my eyes and followed the call of the unseen. At this point, Jiku paused and looked at Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao's expressions. As if afraid that the two of them wouldn't believe her, she said weakly later, I seem to have fallen asleep, but I also seem to be wrapped by some kind of power. When I woke up and opened my eyes, I was already on the 5th level. At that time I was sitting on the altar, and the heavenly star chain around my neck was shining with starlight. The array patterns on the ground and the dozen or so statues around me all lit up and released a powerful force. All kinds of forces gathered and drowned me like a flood. Chapter 2277. Even though Jiku's narration sounded very bizarre, if it were any other person, they would not believe such a thing at all. However, Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao were different. Both of them had experienced all kinds of thrilling and bizarre things long ago. They also had extraordinary knowledge and background. Therefore, both of them could accept and believe what Jiku said. Both of them looked at Jiku expectantly and asked, What happened after that? What happened to you in the dreamland? Jiku was stunned for a moment and asked with a strange expression, Brother Tianqing, eldest senior sister, what I said just now was so bizarre, but you actually believed it? Actually, I still can't believe that everything I experienced before was real. Hearing her say this, Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao became even more curious. Cuckoo, what exactly did you experience? Tell us quickly. Did you see something special in the illusion? Or did you get some kind of opportunity? Jiku nodded and said as she recalled, in the illusion I seemed to have turned into a bird, flying at the top of the sky. Under the sky there were mountains and rivers, ancient and majestic cities, and all kinds of strange powerhouses. They were fighting fiercely in the sky, and when they cast spells, rings of colorful halos would light up behind them. I vaguely remember that it seemed to be the power of the Maxim, which only the gods of the upper realm have. Hearing this, Ji Tianqing quickly nodded in agreement. That's right. Only the real gods can control the power of the Maxim and give birth to the Maxim halo. The more maxim halos a god has, the more maxim he can control and the stronger he is. It seems that the scene you saw in the illusion should be an illusion of the god realm. Jika got the encouragement and affirmation, so she dispelled her worries and continued. After that, many gods who were all-powerful fought in the sky. They were so powerful that they could pick the stars and the moon, and they could crush a world with a wave of their hands. I vaguely remember that there were over 100 of them, and they all had 3 heads and 6 arms. They were bare-chested and looked extremely ferocious. They were besieging an illusory figure in the sky. It looked like a huge bird that could cover the sky and the sun. It could release flames that could destroy the world. There were also a dozen or so Yao gods of different shapes and sizes. They seemed to be the subordinates of the flaming bird, and they were resisting the attacks of the giants with all their might. It was unknown how long they had been fighting, but they had actually shattered the sky. More than a dozen Yao gods had been slaughtered by the giants. The giant flaming bird was also smashed into pieces, turning into a rain of fire that rained down from the sky. There were many cracks in the sky, and there was also a huge white light vortex. Many flames passed through the cracks and fell into the void. However, a flame fell into the white light vortex and disappeared. After that, the illusion naturally dissipated. But I couldn't wake up. Scenes of the battle kept appearing in my soul, and the shadow of that giant flaming bird. At this point, Jika finished his story. However, Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao were not done listening. Their eyes were shining. It ended just like that? That's impossible, right? The scene in the illusion was actually a battle between the upper realm gods? This could be a great opportunity. The two of them were overwhelmed with emotions as they fantasized about the magnificent scene. Many thoughts and guesses were formed. After a while, Ji Tianqing collected his thoughts and looked at Jiku with a serious expression. He said, "Cuckoo, it's definitely not a coincidence that you could enter such a bizarre illusion. If I'm not wrong, it must be related to your identity and this divine pagoda. The dozen or so Yao gods that you mentioned, are they very similar to these Yao god statues?" After saying that, he pointed at the many statues around the altar. Jiku looked at the Yao god statues around him and quickly nodded. Yes, their appearance and aura are very similar to these statues. Ji Tianqing was even more certain of his conjecture. He asked impatiently, "Cuckoo, think about it again. Other than the scene in the illusion, what else did you see?" Jiku frowned and recalled silently for a moment. Then he showed a surprised expression. "I remember now. After the illusion ended, my mind was in a daze and I was still in a state of drowsiness. At that time there seemed to be a lot of miscellaneous information that flooded into my soul like seawater. I was dizzy for a long time before I woke up. Those miscellaneous information seemed to be Yao clan's words and symbols. There were more than 9,000 of them in total. It's just that I didn't have time to study those words. I don't know what they mean." Hearing this, Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao looked at each other and smiled happily. "Ah, Cuckoo, you're so silly. You found a treasure, you know?" Ji Tianqing laughed heartily. Yun Yao also smiled and said, "Aku, those 9,000 Yao clan's words and symbols are probably some kind of information, divine skills, or secrets. All in all, if you can have such a fortuitous encounter, the information you obtained must be priceless." Jiku was still a little confused. He shook his head in disbelief and said, "That can't be, right? Isn't this divine pagoda Big Brother Tianqing's? I didn't do anything. Why would I encounter such a strange thing? It's even more impossible for me to obtain any divine skills or secrets." Ji Tianqing waved his hand and explained with a smile, "Cuckoo, speaking of this Joqian 10 Absolutes pagoda, I have to tell you how I got this divine pagoda. This is the northernmost part of the ruins of God. 2 years ago, there was news that someone found the entrance to the Yin-Yang secret realm. He explained everything to Jiku. Jiku was enlightened after hearing this. He nodded and said, "I see. If that's the case, Big Brother Tianqing also entered this divine pagoda by chance. You only obtained a small golden pagoda. You can go in and out at any time, but you can't control this divine pagoda." Ji Tianqing nodded and said, "Not only can I not control it, but I can only explore up to the 6th floor. I haven't even been to the 7th floor. From your experience, you seem to be fated with this divine pagoda. You seem to have obtained some kind of inheritance. Seeing Jika's complicated feelings, he said in a serious tone, Kuku, you have to remember those Yao clan's words. Study them at all costs. I have a feeling that those Yao clan's words might be related to the owner of this divine pagoda. You have to know that these 18 demon god statues are all monarch god level Yao clan experts. The owner of this divine pagoda is a godly king level Yao clan expert who lives in the 33 grotto heavens. If you can really obtain its inheritance, you have a high chance of reaching the godly king level in this life and surpass your cultivation in your previous life. This huge surprise did not make Jika dizzy. Instead, it made her even calmer. Chapter 2278. Jika didn't waste any time. She memorized the messy demon language and symbols and engraved them in her soul. She would never forget them. Then, she took out a jade slip and recorded over 100 pieces of information in it. Taking advantage of the fact that Ji Tianqing and Yunyao were both present to brainstorm, she handed the jade slip to them. Big brother Tianqing, eldest senior sister. Let's take a look together. What exactly are these words? Ji Tianqing and Yunyao naturally wouldn't refuse. Both of them had profound knowledge and were proficient in the language and writing of the demon race. Of course, Yunyao was only proficient in the demon language of this world. She wasn't as knowledgeable as Ji Tianqing. Both of them released their divine senses and invaded the jade slip to read the hundreds of messages one by one. After 15 minutes, Ji Tianqing recognized all the words and immediately revealed a joyful smile. It's just as Yao Yao expected. Ji Ku and Yunyao both looked at him with anticipation. Do you understand the meaning of these messages? Ji Tianqing nodded and said with certainty, those are the demon language of the heavenly realm. They have been used for tens of thousands of years since ancient times and haven't changed much. Every message is a complete sentence. With hundreds of sentences piled together, of course it's very messy. However, as long as you understand the meaning of each sentence, you can reorder them. Most importantly, this was an incomparably profound deity technique. Although there are only hundreds of sentences here, I'm sure that this must be a godly king-level secret art. It contains incredible divine powers. Ji Ku and Yunyao listened attentively and nodded slightly in agreement. Their eyes were filled with anticipation. Big brother Tianqing, you've already understood those sentences. Do you know what cultivation technique this is? Ji Tianqing frowned and said regretfully, I've only read hundreds of sentences. I haven't recognized the name of the cultivation technique. Jika quickly picked up the jade slip and recorded more than 300 sentences in it. Then he handed it to Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing took the jade slip and looked at it carefully for an hour. Then he recognized the sentences and arranged them in a simple order. He looked up at Jiku and said with a smile, found it. A few sentences are the general outline of the cultivation technique, and more than 20 sentences are the foundation of the cultivation technique. As for the name of the cultivation technique, it seems to be the immortal art or the 9 revolutions indestructible art. I'm afraid that I'll have to study it thoroughly to determine the name of this cultivation technique. When Yunyao and Jiku heard, they both had puzzled looks. Immortal art? 9 revolutions indestructible art? Could it be a divine art of immortality? The name is quite exaggerated, but I keep feeling that it's weird. After all, the scene's a demon, that flaming bird and a dozen demon immortals have all been killed. Ji Tianqing smiled and shook his head. He explained, even if you're a divine king and stand at the peak of the gods, you're not invincible. How can there be a true immortal in this world? Who can transcend the cycle of life and death? That's not something that can be achieved by cultivating a cultivation technique. But no matter what, with this cultivation technique, Kuku can benefit from it for the rest of your life. If you can comprehend it thoroughly, with your talent and perseverance, you'll have a chance to become a divine king. Jika collected his thoughts and said seriously, Big brother Tianqing, don't worry. I'll remember this cultivation technique and do my best to comprehend it. You've already helped me organize the general outline and the beginning of the cultivation technique. It's enough for me to comprehend it for a while and establish my foundation. Next, I plan to stay in the Divine Pagoda and comprehend and cultivate this cultivation technique. I know you guys still have important things to do. You've already been delayed for 2 months. It's not good to stay here." Hearing her say this, Yunyao was a little surprised. She asked, "Aku, you're not leaving with us?" Jika shook his head and said, "No, I've suddenly obtained such a great opportunity. Of course I have to cherish it and master this cultivation technique as soon as possible. Moreover, I'm already too far behind you guys. Even if I stay by your side, I won't be able to help you. Staying here to comprehend the cultivation technique is the best choice." Jika's tone was firm. It was obvious that she had made up her mind. Although Yunyao felt that it was a pity, she could understand her feelings and didn't try to persuade her anymore. Ji Tianqing naturally agreed with her decision. However, he asked worriedly, "Cuckoo, if we leave, how will you enter and exit this divine pagoda? If you're trapped here and can't leave, I'm afraid it'll be very inconvenient." Jika shook his head and smiled. "Don't worry. When I was asleep, I seem to have formed a strange connection with these 18 demon god statues. I can even use the heavenly star chain to open the Daoyuo divine formation under our feet." Ji Tianqing was relieved. He said earnestly, "Cuckoo, you only have the strength of a tribulation transcendence realm cultivator now. If you master that cultivation technique, your strength will definitely increase exponentially. However, you can't trigger the heavenly tribulation in the divine pagoda. You have to go outside the divine pagoda. Also, you can't enter the divine pagoda. If you want to send a message, you have to go outside the divine pagoda." Jika memorized all of it. Yunyao stayed behind and said something personal to Jiku. Ji Tianqing left the 5th floor and went to the 4th floor. The 4th floor of the Divine Pagoda was the Divine Sea. It was the place where he found Little Blue Kuan. Standing on the endless sea, he opened the sword world and said to Little Blue Kuan with his spiritual sense, "Fathead fish, you've been making a fuss about returning to the Divine Sea. Now I'll fulfill your wish." After saying that, he released a majestic dermic power and grabbed Little Blue Kuan from the sword world. He threw it into the Divine Sea. Plop! With a muffled sound, Little Blue Kuan, which was as big as a mountain, smashed into the Divine Sea, splashing a huge wave hundreds of meters high. It quickly floated to the surface of the sea and looked up at Ji Tianqing with a confused expression. Above its head, a dense white dragon shadow was circling and dancing. It asked with a voice full of grievance, "Master, what are you doing?" "We're cultivating a divine art." Ji Tianqing was secretly sweating. On the surface, he remained calm and said calmly, "It's okay. You can cultivate here. I'm going to leave for a while. You can stay here at ease." Little Blue Kuan didn't feel that there was anything wrong. It circled the sea a few times and was very satisfied. The white dragon was a little worried and hurriedly reminded, "Master, remember to pick us up when you're done. Don't forget about us." Ji Tianqing glanced at it and said angrily, "Do I look like a forgetful person?" After saying that, he left in a flash. Not long after, he returned to the 5th floor of the Divine Pagoda. After saying goodbye to Jiku, he left with Yunyao. Swoosh! In a flash, the two appeared on a barren mountain thousands of feet high outside the Yin-Yang mystic realm. Yunyao summoned the glazed fire dragon. The two stood on the dragon's back and flew to the south. Chapter 2279. In the heart of dark North Mountain, the 10,000-meter-tall sacred mountain was still shrouded by black clouds of demonic energy. The great demon Saint Ling Xian stood high in the sky, looking down at the sacred mountain and wasteland with a gloomy expression. On the wasteland that was riddled with holes, there were more than 200,000 demon commoners. They were like black ants that covered the ground, working hard. They were constantly transporting soil and sand from the distant mountains to fill the deep holes and ravines in the wasteland. There were also hundreds of warriors who had reached the primordial soul realm, working together to cast spells to repair the cracks in the ground. On the sacred mountain, there were also more than 100,000 demon citizens and craftsmen, repairing the cracks in the sacred mountain and rebuilding Dark North Palace and the torture department. Besides the craftsmen and citizens, demon warriors and guards could be seen everywhere. They were also busy. All in all, at least 300,000 demon citizens and warriors were working hard to rebuild the mountain. Moreover, this scene had already lasted for more than a month. According to the current progress, it would take about half a month to complete and restore the mountain to its original state. As the great demon saint, Ling Xian had not been able to rest for more than a month. Not only did he have to preside over the reconstruction work, he also had to deal with the affairs of the entire demon race. The more tired he felt, the more he hated Ji Tianxing and Luo Shui. Especially Luo Shui. He had come to Dark North Mountain twice, but both times he had destroyed Dark North Palace and almost destroyed the sacred mountain. As a result, the demon race needed a few months to recover. Every time he thought of this, Ling Xian was so angry that he wanted to vomit blood. However, although he was angry, he did not despair. If the divine mountain was destroyed, it could be repaired. If the Beiming Palace was destroyed, it could be rebuilt. Most importantly, the ancestor demon god had finally recovered to the god realm. This was the greatest support and backing of Ling Xian and all the demon citizens. From now on, Dark North Mountain would have a demon god overseeing it. They would no longer need to hide in Dark North Mountain, nor would they need to worry about the invasion of the three divine kingdoms. Even though the ancestor demon god was still in seclusion to consolidate his foundation. But Ling Xian believed that in at most a year, the ancestor demon god would be able to dominate the world and would not fear the three martial gods. At that time, Dark North Mountain would welcome true prosperity and glory. Thinking of this, Ling Xian secretly clenched his fists, his eyes full of hope. He really hoped that day would come sooner. At this moment, a black shadow flew into the sky and arrived beside him. Shua! The pitch-black devil qi dispersed, revealing the figure of the third devil Saint Hatu. Ling Xian glanced at him and asked casually, Batua, have you finished rebuilding the outer walls and inner courtyard of Beiming Palace? When can we set up the defensive array? Matua hurriedly replied, the outer wall and the inner courtyard are about to be completed. We can start setting up the grand formation in 3 days at the latest. But that's not why I'm here. I just received a communication jade slip from the Heaven Extinction Divine Nation. As he spoke, Batua took out a jade slip and handed it over to Ling Xian. A message from Martial God Tianju? Ling Xian frowned. He had a bad premonition. He reached out and took the jade slip. His divine sense entered it and read the information inside. A moment later, his face darkened, and anger surged between his brows. Seeing his anger, Batua asked, what's wrong? What did Martial God Tianju say? Ling Xian's eyes flashed with a cold light. He sneered. What else could he say? Of course he was disappointed. He angrily questioned me why the plan failed again. At that time he sent a message to the ancestor, wanting to make a deal with him. He wanted us to find a way to get rid of Ji Tianxing. So, I used you to carry out this mission under the ancestor's instructions. I didn't expect you to fail. Then we used Aku to lure Ji Tianxing into the trap. In the end we failed again. When Martial God Tianju found out about this, he sent a message to question me and even threw a fit at me. Batua nodded to show that he understood. He sneered and said, haha, we knew that Tianju wouldn't turn a deaf ear to it. However, he's really old and muddle-headed. He actually sent a message to reprimand you? Isn't this overstepping your authority? Ling Xian sneered and said in a mocking tone, in the past, our clan had no leader. We had to rely on the Tianju divine nation. So we listened to him. But now it's different. The ancestor has recovered his god realm. He's about to restore the glory and majesty of the death god. Martial God Tianju is still as arrogant as before. What a joke. Batua stopped smiling and said seriously, however, the ancestor and Martial God Tianju have an agreement. Our clan will need Tianju in the future. So we can't fall out with him now. You should think about how to reply to him. Ling Xian nodded and waved his hand. Go do your thing. I'll deal with this. Batua bade him farewell, then turned and flew away. After a while, Ling Xian began to input a message into the jade slip. Then he waved his hand and sent out the jade slip. The jade slip turned into a dot of starlight and disappeared into the sky. Haha, everyone wants Ji Tianxing to die, but who's willing to pay a huge price for it? Isn't that making a wedding dress for someone else? Ling Xian had a cold smile on his face as he muttered to himself. Tianju God Nation. In the magnificent, sacred and majestic divine palace, Yi Lushui hurriedly passed through the palace and entered the deepest part of the palace. He came to the door of a secret room. He tidied up his purple robe and combed his messy white hair. After making sure his clothes were neat, he bowed to the door of the secret room and said respectfully, "Subordinate Yi Lushui greets Lord God Lord. Please give me your orders." The wide and tall black stone door suddenly lit up with white light and formed a mirror-like light screen. A middle-aged man in a golden robe and a crown appeared in the light screen. It was Martial God Tianju's projection. He frowned and his face was filled with anger. He scolded coldly, "Damn demon bastards. They're really a bunch of selfish and stupid trash." Hearing this, Yi Lushui immediately understood. Martial God Tianju was so angry and summoned him. It must be because of the demon race. As expected, Martial God Tianju continued, "I sent a message to Great Demon Saint Ling Xian and asked why they haven't gotten rid of Ji Tianxing. But Ling Xian didn't apologize at all. Instead, his attitude became even more unyielding. He pushed the blame to Luo Shui and claimed that Ji Tianxing had Luo Shui's protection. The demon race couldn't do anything to him. If I want to get rid of Ji Tianxing, I have to think of a way myself. What a bastard! Does Ling Xian think that I'm in seclusion in the Divine Kingdom, and don't know anything?" Chapter 2280. Martial God Tianju was unable to restrain his anger, and his words were filled with killing intent. Yi Lushui maintained a respectful attitude from beginning to end, and after listening to him, he began to persuade him. "Lord God, please calm down, there is no need to be too worried. According to my investigation, Ji Tianxing did indeed bring Luo Shui to North Underworld Mountain, and both sides fought a great battle. Countless demon elites died, and North Underworld Mountain was almost destroyed, and North Underworld Palace was blasted into ruins. If not for the ancestor fiend god appearing in time to block Luo Shui, North Underworld Mountain would have been flattened by Luo Shui. The demon race suffered such a heavy blow. It is understandable that Ling Xian is angry." Hearing his words, Martial God Tianju's anger dissipated greatly. Yi Lushui continued, "Ling Xian's tough attitude is probably related to the ancestor fiend god. I dare to guess that the ancestor fiend god has most likely recovered to the god realm. Otherwise, it would not have been able to block the attack of Luo Shui's true body." Martial God Tianju thought for a while, and nodded slightly in agreement. Your analysis is very reasonable. No wonder Ling Xian's attitude changed. It is because he has confidence. However, the ancestor fiend god has just recovered to the god realm. His divine Dao foundation is definitely not stable, and he needs to cultivate for a few more years. Yi Lushui continued, "Therefore, in the next few years, the ancestor fiend god will not personally deal with Ji Tianxing, unless he has enough confidence to kill Luo Shui." Martial God Tianju frowned and said with a gloomy expression, "Luo Shui was the first to come out of seclusion, and he is protecting Ji Tianxing with his life. It is indeed very troublesome. The ancestor fiend god will not make a move, and Ling Xian and Ma Tu are trash. They cannot kill Ji Tianxing. It seems that if we want to get rid of Ji Tianxing, we will have to think of a way ourselves. I hate that I have been in seclusion for more than 200 years, and I am only one step away from attaining great success. I cannot waste all my previous efforts just to deal with Ji Tianxing. But if I don't make a move, who can successfully kill Ji Tianxing?" Martial God Tianju had many martial saints under his command, but no one was Ji Tianxing's match. Grand Divine Sun Yuanzhan was not powerful enough. The Lord of Sky City and the Governor of the Immortal Guards, Qin Zheng, had been killed. Yi Lushui held the Taiyin soul-severing ruler, and personally went to assassinate Ji Tianxing. But it ended in failure. Martial God Tianju could not think of anyone else who could take on this heavy responsibility. At this moment, Yi Lushui smiled confidently and said in a playful tone, "Divine Lord, don't worry. If you want to get rid of Ji Tianxing as soon as possible, I have a good plan." Marshal God Tianju's eyes brightened. He asked with anticipation, "What good plan? Tell me about it." "The three hidden sects." Yi Lushui stretched out 3 fingers and said with a playful smile, "They are all ancient families that have existed for nearly 10,000 years and have long been forgotten by the world. However, they had a large number of martial Saint Realm experts and had mastered many lost secret techniques. They were the best candidates to assassinate Ji Tianqing, even though they had always lived in seclusion and did not intervene in the disputes of the mortal world. However, we only need to pay a small price to get them to deal with Ji Tianqing." Hearing this, Marshal God Tianju sneered and nodded. "That's right. The 3 hidden sects, how could I have forgotten about them? More than 3,000 years ago, before I established the Heaven End Divine Nation, the 3 hidden sects were the most powerful families in the continent. Among them, the Jiang family was good at formations and swordsmanship, the Helian family was good at refining magic treasures and elixirs, and the Tuoba family was good at rearing and controlling beasts. Back then, the 3 hidden sects lived in the Luna Star Cave and had many descendants. It was the beyond heaven strange land that their ancestors had created together. It could sustain the 3 hidden sects for tens of thousands of years. However, the Luna Star Cave was occupied by me. After the 3 hidden sects left, they lived in seclusion in the Fengling Mountain at the end of the North Sea. The last time I saw people from the 3 aristocratic families was 700 years ago. Now that hundreds of years have passed, I wonder how they are doing. They must miss their homeland and want to return to the Luna Star Cave even in their dreams." In fact, the Luna Star Cave was a place similar to the Heaven End Divine Nation. The Luna Star Cave was located in the Heavenly Wind Fire Layer. The outside was the golden light barrier that sealed the world, and the inside was connected to the 5 elements world. After Marshal God Tianju took the Luna Star Cave, he used it as a palace or a place to relax and live in seclusion. In addition, the Luna Star Cave was rich in resources and spiritual qi. It was a holy place for cultivation. Normally, Marshal God Tianju's divine sons and divine daughters would often live in the Luna Star Cave and train there. Yi Lushui saw Marshal God Tianju nod in agreement, so he cupped his hands and bowed, saying, "Since you have no objections, I will do as you say. As long as you give the order, I will bring it to the North Sea's Fengling Mountain to discuss this matter with the 3 hidden sects. Even if they are angry, don't worry. As long as we are willing to return the Luna Star Cave to them, they will agree." Marshal God Tianju nodded slightly and said in a dignified tone, "The Luna Star Cave doesn't mean much to me. It is just a place for the children to train. However, it means a lot to the 3 hidden sects. After all, it is a holy place left behind by their ancestors. As long as I am willing to return the Luna Star Cave, they will follow my instructions and try to kill Ji Tianqing." Marshal God Tianju was silent for a moment. He thought for a while and suddenly shook his head, saying, "No, although this is a good idea, it is not perfect. I am running out of people to use. This is the last chance. We can only succeed, we cannot fail. If this plan fails, I will have to come out of seclusion and kill Ji Tianqing with my own hands." The smile on Yi Lushui's face froze. He asked respectfully, "What do you mean, Sir God Tianju?" Marshal God Tianju looked at him with a solemn expression and said in a dignified tone, "The 3 hidden sects have many martial saints and they have mastered all kinds of secret skills. However, the Pillar of Heaven's mountains is heavily guarded and Ji Tianqing is cunning. I am worried that the 3 hidden sects will not be able to break through the Pillar of Heaven's mountains and kill Ji Tianqing. To ensure that nothing goes wrong, we need to change the plan. We need to lure Ji Tianqing out of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains and deal with him somewhere else." Yi Lushui immediately listened attentively and said, "I would like to hear the details." Marshal God Tianju smirked and said in a playful tone, 8 years ago, didn't you find a secret realm in the ruins of God? It might be Marshal God Nangong's cave dwelling, right?" Yi Lushui immediately guessed what he meant. His body shook and his expression changed drastically. "Sir God Tianju, do you mean we need to use the illusory space secret realm as bait? However, isn't the price too high? It took me decades of painstaking effort and sacrificed hundreds of guards to find that secret realm. Until now, we have spent countless manpower and resources, but we have not been able to enter the depths of the secret realm and obtain the treasures in it. Chapter 2281. The illusory sky secret realm was located in the depths of the godly ruins. It was hidden in a very hidden and dangerous ruin. Back then, Yi Lushui had spent dozens of years with hundreds of elites to find the secret realm. After a lot of exploration and research, he was sure that the illusory sky secret realm was most likely martial god Nangong's cave abode. Martial god Nangong was one of the overlords of the continent 8,000 years ago. He was best at forging divine weapons and artifacts. He had forged countless divine weapons and artifacts in his life. Throughout the ages, there was almost no one who could surpass him in the field of refining divine artifacts. However, no matter how powerful martial god Nangong was, he could not ascend. He could not escape the 10,000-year limit, so he could only turn into dry bones and yellow sand. About 4,000 years ago, martial god Nangong had reached the end of his life and passed away. No one knew when he died or where he died. Even the divine weapons and artifacts he had forged before his death never appeared again. From then on, martial god Nangong no longer existed in the world. Only his legends remained. Thousands of years had passed since then. There were very few people in the world who still remembered martial god Nangong. However, those who had heard of martial god Nangong's legends would yearn for it. Where were martial god Nangong's remains? Where were the divine weapons and artifacts he had forged, the endless resources and martial arts inheritances he had left behind? If one could obtain martial god Nangong's treasures, wouldn't they be the richest in the world and have a chance to become a god? Because of this, a small number of martial arts experts remembered martial god Nangong's legends and tried to find martial god Nangong's remains or cave abode. Yi Lushui was one of them. Not only was he powerful, but he also had the support of the Tianju divine nation. He had great power and could use endless manpower and resources. Therefore, he was the only one who had successfully found martial god Nangong's cave abode. In the past 8 years he had tried all kinds of methods to obtain martial god Nangong's treasures, and used countless manpower and resources. However, in the end he did not make any progress. Other than entering the illusory sky secret realm, he could not enter martial god Nangong's cave abode, let alone the treasures and divine weapons. Yi Lushui had been waiting patiently. Only when martial god Tianju came out of seclusion could he open martial god Nangong's cave abode and take the divine weapons and treasures inside. However, he did not expect that martial god Tianju would give away the illusory void secret realm before coming out of seclusion. Currently, all information regarding the illusory void secret zone was kept confidential. Once this information was made public, it would definitely cause the entire Shenwu continent to boil over, and countless powers would fight over it. Even the other 2 divine kingdoms would intervene. Yi Lushui was heartbroken. His heart was bleeding. Martial god Tianju saw Yi Lushui's strange expression and the pained look on his face. He comforted him. Yi Lushui, you don't have to be so worried. If I don't put in a lot of effort, how can I have full confidence? Ji Tianqing must have heard about the legends of Nangong martial god. Now that he was in a precarious situation with enemies on all sides, he must urgently increase his strength. If he learns about martial god Nangong's cave abode, he will definitely be interested and come to explore it. Yi Lushui suppressed his heartache and nodded calmly. Divine Lord, you mean that we should release the news of the illusory sky secret realm to lure Ji Tianqing to explore it? When that time comes, we'll gather the 3 great hidden sects and the martial saints of our country and join forces to kill him in the secret realm. Martial god Tianju nodded slightly and said solemnly, that's right. In order to not arouse Ji Tianqing's suspicions, this news cannot be spread from our country. You have to find a way to spread the news from the Taihao Divine Kingdom, or the Luoshui Divine Kingdom. When the news spreads, it will attract the martial saints of the various powers to rush to the ruins of God to explore it. When that time comes, you will personally lead the martial saints of our country, and the 3 great hidden sects to the secret realm and wait for an opportunity to strike. At least a dozen martial saints will join forces to deal with Ji Tianqing. Only then can we guarantee that nothing will go wrong. At this point, martial god Tianju looked deeply at Yi Lushui and exhorted, those who are rushing to explore the secret realm are all martial saints. It's basically impossible for them to enter the cave abode and obtain divine weapons and treasures. After this matter is over, Chase the other martial saints away and close the entrance to the illusory realm. If the mission is completed successfully, I will return Luna Star Paradise to the 3 great hidden sects. Moreover, after I come out of seclusion, I will personally open Nangong Martial God's cave abode. I guarantee that Nangong Martial God's divine Tao inheritance and divine weapons will be given to you to help you break through to the divine realm as soon as possible. After receiving Martial God Tianju's guarantee, Yi Lushui felt much better. He nodded solemnly and cupped his fists towards Martial God Tianju and said, I understand. Rest assured, Divine Lord. I will do it now. At the latest, within 3 months there will be a result. Ji Tianqing will definitely die. Martial God Tianju exhorted in a solemn tone. Yi Lushui, you must remember that this is the last chance. You must not make any mistakes. If you fail again, Ji Tianqing will definitely take revenge. At that time you must not act on your own. You must be on guard. Only when I come out of seclusion will I personally kill him. Yes, Divine Lord. Yi Lushui cupped his fists and said goodbye to Martial God Tianju. He then turned around and left. The light screen on the black stone door gradually dissipated. South of North Underworld Mountain, 100 Origin City. In the majestic and dignified City Master's mansion, and Yu was sitting in the meeting hall. On both sides of the hall, there were 2 rows of guards in black armor, a total of 16 people. The atmosphere was heavy and oppressive, and Yu's dignified gaze swept across everyone and said expressionlessly, 2 months ago, Ling Xian's plan failed. I could not kill Ji Tianqing. Since then, the agreement between me and the demon race has been put aside and has not been fulfilled. It seems that Ling Xian does not intend to give us the 500,000 demon race warriors that he promised. The facts have proven that the cunning and treacherous demon race is not trustworthy. We can only rely on ourselves to conquer this continent. The ancestor demon god has already recovered to the god realm. However, he still needs to rest in seclusion for a year to stabilize his power and realm. In other words, we only have less than a year left. After the ancestor demon god stabilizes his realm, the first thing he will do is to take back the 5 regions in the south and destroy us. Hearing this, the dozens of guards in black armor felt a great pressure and all of them clenched their fists. Everyone's eyes were burning with a scarlet flame, bursting with intense battle intent. And Yu continued, therefore, before the ancestor demon god comes out of seclusion, we must quickly occupy the 72 cities and move our foundation there. A few months ago, I knew that Ling Xian was not reliable. Therefore, I did not expect him to send out 500,000 warriors for me to command. Since he is not giving, I will take it myself. You're tuning in to the Li Mei Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.